Welcome, everyone. My name is Melissa Reitmeyer, and I'm really excited to be your moderator today for DSS, the Department of Social Services, collaborating to build a child and family well-being system in South Carolina. We're really excited about the Systems Transformation Symposium, and I am, again, thrilled to be your moderator. I just wanted to let you know and point to a few things before we formally get started with Director Leach. And that is that there will be a couple opportunities where we will respond to answers from each of you as you pose questions throughout today's symposium. If you notice, there'll be an option from 10:55 to 11:05 for Q&A from participants, and then again at the end from 12:15 to 12:30. We are in the process of posting the agenda so that you have it immediately available to you so that you can track as we go throughout our morning together. With that being said, it is a great honor for me to be able to introduce Michael Leach. He is the State Director at the South Carolina Department of Social Services. He is going to kind of kick off our keynote this morning. And he, prior to his appointment, Mr. Leach served with the Department of Children's Services for more than 10 years, most recently as the Deputy Commissioner of Child Programs. There, he also served as Executive Director of the Office of Continuous Quality Improvement, Director of Performance and Quality Improvement, Director of Independent Living, and the Director of System Integrations. Mr. Leach has done extensive public speaking related to his experience with child and adolescent needs and strengths too. Extension of foster care and help the Child Welfare Agency maintain accreditation through the Council on Accreditation, which we all know that is no easy feat. Mr. Leach was also a therapist at the Vanderbilt Child and Adolescent Outpatient Clinic in Tennessee, and his experience in facilitating crisis response services at a community mental health center and crisis management and congregate care. I know personally I've had the opportunity to work with leadership at DSS and Director Leach, and I am very excited for today and what we have to share for this report out. Director Leach.
Melissa, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. We have a large audience, which is really exciting. There's a lot of interest around here. So thank you for joining us for the 2020 Winter Stakeholder event. My name is Mike Leach, and I'm the State Director of the South Carolina Department of Social Services. We are excited to be hosting an event this year with the University of South Carolina and Dean Pitner and his team with the UofSC School of Social Work. We couldn't do this and all of this valuable work without him and his team and Carl Moss and all of them. Our theme for this event this year is collaborating to build a child and family well-being system in South Carolina, a symposium on systems transformation. The goal of today's meeting is to engage you in an equal share of information and ideas and to share with you the state's effort to collaboratively transform South Carolina's child and family serving system, all with the purpose of helping us at DSS resourcefully collaborate in serving children and families throughout the state. Throughout the pandemic, we at the South Carolina Department of Social Services has taken measured steps to continue our critical mission of providing food and financial assistance and promoting the safety of children and vulnerable adults in South Carolina. Our focus has been continued operations of our essential priority business functions, despite the challenges and barriers presented by COVID-19. Our DSS team members, many who are on this call at every level of the agency, have worked tirelessly to continue providing services under unprecedented circumstances, and in every area of our agency has had to adapt its practices and processes to the state of emergency. Every day within the agency and across the state, there is a focus on strengthening families. And we know now, we know that now more than ever, we have families across the state who rely on the services we provide and who cannot be invisible to us. We believe there's a high likelihood that we will see an increase in adverse childhood experiences as a result of the pandemic and the increased stress and negative societal factors it will bring. ACEs can have a lasting negative effects on health, well-being, and opportunity. and the staggering economic and social costs of increased ACEs to families, to communities, and to society at large will have significant repercussions for South Carolina over the next several years and into future generations. Additionally, we at DSS are engaging our staff around the issue of bias. In decision-making, bias based upon implicit bias and racial bias. We ask that you join along with us to confront racial and exposure bias by being cognizant of decisions that may be influenced by bias on the base of race or a focus on information that confirms pre-existing attitudes. As a social service system, we recognize that we are not immune to the challenges posed by racial bias. We acknowledge that there are many times when families we serve enter our system as a result of bias, racism, and a lack of access to resources. And we also recognize that these challenges affect you, our partners, as well. You know, we have families fighting for their lives, fighting for their children. They may be fighting addictions, stereotypes, poverty, mental health, and cycles of societal oppression. We have to do better. We cannot do more harm to our families and our children. We have to heal families. We have to preserve families. We have to strengthen families. We have to build different strengths that are going to help them progress as a family unit together. We also acknowledge that there's times when poverty is confused or misidentified as neglect. Poverty alone does not equate to neglect, and we are working to transform this thinking with our staff and others to focus on a connection of resources to address the poverty. We know that we cannot achieve our agency mission to promote the safety, permanency, and well-being of children and youth, families, and vulnerable adults without confronting these issues head on. We ask you, our partners, to join with us in confronting these issues and changing your perspective on this with us. We collectively must be cognizant of all the potential socioeconomic consequences this pandemic has already caused to our communities and those we have yet to see. We must remember to care for those around us, to have empathy, to express understanding, and to have grace with one another, our partners, each other, and the families we work with. We must change our perception and our mindsets towards inclusion if we truly want to help support and strengthen families. We need to ask ourselves, how does the community as a whole engage and support families to meet their full range of needs, especially during a pandemic, when a family's whole world is having to adapt? In this vein, today you will have the opportunity to hear from several key system leaders in the work with children and families in South Carolina, and how we are working individually and collectively to address many of the issues I brought forth. Topics of conversation will include an overview of their current work with families and children, how they as a system and leaders envision the work evolving, and expected outcomes for children and families, among others. We have to do better, y'all. Our outcomes across the state, whether it's kids count data or child welfare data or any other data, are not very good. And we know that we can be better. We know we are better. And we are going to work to make sure that we address these things and put systems in place and continue to work together collectively to address many of these things. We want to engage you all in an open dialogue about how we can address these issues together in partnership with all of you. Together, we can transform the child and family serving system in South Carolina into one that is driven by communities it serves. It's focused on removing the stigma associated with asking for and receiving help, and provides for a holistic well-being of children and families in South Carolina. So I challenge you all through this work today and even into the future. You know, how are you going to be part of this system change? How are you going to be part of transformation? How are you going to be part of a well-being system where we work to heal families and build protective factors? I challenge you on that, and thank you very much. Melissa?
Thank you so much, Director Leach. Next, I'd like to introduce Professor Ronald Pitner. He joined the faculty of the College of Social Work in 2009. After serving as an Associate Dean for Curriculum, he began his term as an Interim Dean in April of 2020. Pitner is also director of the DeQuincey Newman Institute for Peace and Social Justice and an affiliate faculty for the Research Consortium on Children and Families. In 2016, Pitner began a 5-year term as an DeQuincey Newman Endowed Chair in Peace and Social Justice. Prior to joining the University of South Carolina, Pitner was an assistant professor at the George Warren Brown School of Social Work at Washington University in St. Louis. I think it's really critical to note that Pitner has really served as a primary investigator on some very important research-funded awards since joining the College of Social Work faculty. He completed a 1-year Access Group Center for Research and Policy Analysis funded research on assessing the viability of race-neutral alternatives in law school admissions. The findings indicated that race-neutral factors may enable law schools to maintain current levels of racial diversity without considering race in the admissions process. Pitner also worked with the Columbia Housing Authority on a 3-year study funded by the Krasegi Foundation for creating healthy environments through community engagements. The goals were to reduce crime and perceptions of crime among public housing residents by increasing residents' active community engagement. The research team established a community empowerment center in the Gonzales Gardens community, providing technical assistance to residents seeking to solve neighborhood issues. Obviously, Professor Pitner, our interim dean, currently has, published greatly, and he's really focused on social cognition, youth violence, and youth and community-based civic engagement. He is very committed to the welfare of our communities in South Carolina, and I know as a faculty member at the College of Social Work that he has been a tremendous leader for us since April. So without further ado, welcome Ron, Dean Pitner.
Thank you, Melissa, for that very nice introduction. Good morning to everyone. On behalf of the College of Social Work, I just want to say that we are honored to be co-leading this event with the Department of Social Service. I want to thank Director Mike Leach and his team for being here today. For Director Mike Leach, we are very impressed with your leadership, and we look forward to our continued work together. I also want to thank Karen Bryan and Dr. Melissa Reitmeyer for organizing this event. I know that they did a lot of work behind the scenes, and there's a lot of work that goes into putting an event like this together. So thank you both for your diligence and hard work. And then finally, I want to thank all of you for attending and participating in the stakeholders meeting. It is so important that stakeholders who have interest in children and families come together periodically to examine issues, to strategize, and to discuss partnerships. So the theme of this event is collaborating to build a child and family well-being system in South Carolina. And that goes to the heart of what the College of Social Work is all about. The College of Social Work has a history of focusing on child and family well-being. And of course, we graduate many students who work with child and family systems. But most importantly, we see the College of Social Work as your College of Social Work. So we are always open to collaborations on child and family matters. So as a college, we have spent much of this academic year focused on the 2 pandemics that have wreaked havoc on our nation. Those, of course, being COVID-19 and racism. For COVID-19, obviously it has really shined the spotlight on our nation's most insidious disparities like racial disparities, class disparities, age disparities, just to name a few. And of course, those clearly get played out in the child and family system. In the College of Social Work, we have incorporated readings on COVID-19 and disparities in different classes. And this was done so that students could grapple with and critically examine how they would respond to disparities related to COVID-19 in multiple settings. And of course, one of those most important settings would be settings focused on children and families. With regards to racism, our college is focused on examining ways to advance racial justice within our college and within our society more generally. So in particular, we have examined our curriculum and how we can make it more anti-racist and anti-oppressive. We also have had a book club focused on Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, so that people in our college and people at the university can sort of embrace the tenets of anti-racism. Also on November 9th, the College of Social Work partnered with the university's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to host a conversation with Professor Ibram Kendi on his book. These are just a few examples of how our college is actively working towards being more anti-racist and anti-oppressive. But of course, with child and family issues, we strongly believe, just like Mike mentioned just a moment ago, we believe that it's useful to examine child and family issues through the lens of anti-racism and anti-oppression. And we definitely have experts in our college that focus on these issues. So definitely we can partner with any agency who want to look at these issues through an anti-oppressive and anti-racist lens. Finally, I just want to mention that the focus of our college, sort of one of the central focuses, is on children and families. Our Center for Child and Family Studies focuses heavily on child welfare issues. Our Institute for Families and Society focuses on ways to enhance the lives of children, youth, and family. Our field office is led by Dr. Reitmeyer, who is an incredible asset to our college. She knows every youth and family agency in South Carolina, which really means that all our students are placed in all of those settings. And when you look at our faculty, approximately 1/3 of our faculty's research agendas and interests are focused on children and families. I know that Dr. Carl Moss will say more about what our faculty, institutes, and centers are doing when it comes to children, when it comes to a focus on children and families. However, I mention all of this now to say that we are a resource when it comes to child and family issues. And we very much like collaborating with stakeholders in South Carolina. So please consider us your College of Social Work when it comes to focusing on child and family issues. I know that this is going to be a great meeting today, and I thank you again for attending. Thank you. Melissa?
Thank you so much, Dean Pitner. Okay, next we have Emily K. Parks. She is a social worker. She's also, most importantly, the Chief of Staff at the South Carolina Department of Social Services. Emily has served in that role, I believe, for a little bit over a year, but she's responsible for the direct leadership and supervision of the agency's communications. She will also serve as our moderator during the question and answer session. So I wanted to just segue or illuminate that for just a second. She also is involved in accountability, data and research, staff training and development and policy and continuous quality improvement. Emily also assists with developing strategic direction and leading operations and implementation for the department at large. Prior to this role, Emily served as the Director of Health Advocacy and Evidence-Based Programs with the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. In that role, Emily held responsibility for ensuring timely access to medical and behavioral health services for children and families served by the department for the oversight of evidence-based program implementation under the department's Title 4E demonstration waiver. Ms. Parks has worked in child welfare for over 8 years and holds a variety of experience from frontline case manager to top agency leadership. Throughout her career, Ms. Parks has leveraged her in reforming and streamlining inefficient processes to improve productivity and program outcomes. I can tell you personally what a joy it has been to work with Emily, and I'm happy to welcome her to tell us more about unveiling of thriving families, safe children, and systems transformation. Emily?
Thank you, Melissa, for that kind introduction. We at the South Carolina Department of Social Services are so excited to share with you this morning that the state of South Carolina is one of 4 jurisdictions nationwide chosen to participate in the first tier of a cutting-edge national program that really aims to move child welfare systems from traditional, reactive, often punitive child protection systems to advanced systems designed to support holistic child and family well-being while preventing child maltreatment and unnecessary family separation. We were especially drawn to this opportunity because we in social services know that at a time like this, during this pandemic, now more than ever, our South Carolina families cannot be invisible to us. While all families are impacted by this pandemic, families in poverty and families who are in marginalized populations are especially vulnerable and are at much higher risk to be left behind. We in social services fear that this pandemic and the resulting consequences of children being away from school, of food insecurities, increased unemployment, pending evictions, and increased costs in many of our sectors is only going to contribute to widening the already significant societal gaps for our most at-risk and vulnerable children, families, and vulnerable adults. These hardships we know will increase stress and anxiety and will have negative impacts for our children and families both now and into the future. We cannot give up on these families, and we cannot relax our efforts in doing everything that in our power to help them thrive. Knowing this, we as a society need to make a commitment to collectively search for increasingly sophisticated and proactive preventive ways to treat trauma and address the underlying symptoms that may be driving a family's inability to meet their most basic and fundamental needs. We need to fund systems that care for children and families, systems that have been underfunded since the last recession over 10 years ago. This can look like funding and building prevention strategies like community family resource centers, social emotional learning opportunities, early childhood visitation programs, increased in-home intensive support services for families, and innovative ways to strengthen individual and family financial security. As part of this focus on prevention and searching for ways to transform the system, this first of its kind partnership, the Thriving Families, Safer Children Work, is a program developed by the U.S. Children's Bureau in collaboration with Casey Family Programs, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and Prevent Child Abuse America. Other areas in addition to South Carolina that were selected to participate in this first of 3 tiers of action include LA County, in California, Colorado, and Nebraska. This new concept, the Thriving Families, Safer Children, will seek involvement from stakeholders to work across all the public, private, and philanthropic sectors to help South Carolina create more just and equitable systems to benefit all children and families through breaking harmful multi-generational cycles of trauma and poverty. Thriving Families, Safer Children will partner with family-serving federal agencies, diverse nonprofits, and community stakeholders, and will lead with families and individuals with lived experience with the system at the forefront to help us develop approaches, supports, resources, and services to meet the unique needs of families while helping families thrive. This work is going to rely heavily on primary and secondary prevention efforts to ensure a full continuum of support, to help strengthen community protective factors, the voices of families, strengthen community support, enhance parental protective factors, and mitigate associated risk factors. Tenets of Thriving Families, Safer Children includes integrating government and community at both policy and practice levels, addressing issues of race equity, and changing community norms around support and connection. It also includes building and measuring parental and caregiver capacities, preventing child maltreatment and fatalities, and engaging our communities in leading this transformation. Our goal is to move our system in South Carolina from a traditional, reactive, often punitive child protection system to an advanced system that's designed to support holistic child and family well-being. Our goal is more fluid interagency coordination and collaboration in serving families and a system of robust community-based interventions and services that are available for all families that takes into consideration social determinants of health. We want to normalize asking for help and receiving help and create a system that feels accessible to all families, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. We are very intentional when talking about this work to say that it's not a project, but rather a transformation, and transformations of this scale are not quick. The speed at which we will be able to shift the system to one focused on child and family well-being will depend on a variety of factors, including receiving necessary funding, community engagement, and buy-in from key stakeholders, including youth, families, and many of you that are in this meeting today in the development of this transformative vision. The COVID-19 pandemic has only intensified our need in South Carolina to overhaul the current system into a 21st century well-being system approach, where families seeking help are viewed as showing strength and resiliency instead of stigmatized or portrayed negatively. We believe that our involvement in South Carolina and Thriving Families Safe for Children has the opportunity to be truly transformational and help us destigmatize seeking and providing help and expand resources and access to those resources to our families across the state who need them the most, moving our system into a space of true prevention and focus on holistic well-being for all families. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Now we get the honor of having Lyman Legters with us, and I hope I have pronounced your last name correctly, Lyman, but let me introduce you. He is currently the Senior Director at Casey Family Programs. He's been at Casey Family Programs since 2002, where he's managed direct service operations and served as a strategic consultant for the foundation. From 2012 through 2015, he was privileged to serve as the Senior Fellow at the U.S. Department of Justice, where he worked on youth violence prevention, juvenile justice systems reform, eliminating racial disparities, and cross-systems alignment and coordination. Prior to joining Casey Family Programs, Lyman served for 20 years in various roles for King County, which is in Seattle, and their juvenile court system. Facilitating systems reform and coordination, improving outcomes for vulnerable children and families, and achieving racial equity have been particular areas of focus during Lyman's career. He currently supports efforts within the foundation designed to achieve racial justice and transform child welfare systems into child, family, and community well-being systems. He's committed to eliminating racial disparities and injustices. Lyman serves on the National Board of Directors for the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, where the Undoing Racism Workshop was actually developed and has been delivered across the country for over 40 years. We are very excited to have him with us. He's actually going to take over as he's going to facilitate first in what order, we're going to have a youth panel that's a lived experience, and then there will be a caregiver panel. So the youth panel is going to contain a couple of individuals, and then we'll move on to the caregiver panel, but we have Maud Abdullah and Malaja Lewis Foreman that may be participating. Lyman, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and good morning, everyone. It's a real privilege to be with you all this morning. It's a particularly exciting time for South Carolina, despite the current environment, obviously impacted by the pandemic and various other factors. This transformation notion is something that's exciting, and I'm really pleased to be the foundation's representative and privileged to be the foundation's representative serving South Carolina. We at Casey Family Programs applaud South Carolina for your willingness to step into this transformational effort at such a time, and we're excited to both partner with you, work alongside you, and invest in your efforts in South Carolina. We've heard both Mike and Emily talk about this transformation effort and how it's really centered on youth and family and community well-being. We can't have a transformation effort without the voice of lived experience. We must elevate the voice of young people who have experience in the system and caregivers who have experience in the system. They are experts in their own right, and we need to recognize them as experts. So it's my distinct privilege to moderate this panel this morning, where we have two young people who are going to share their story and share some of their insights. So I'd like to introduce Maj Abdullah and Malaja Lewis Foreman. And I want to, are they on the screen? I'm sorry, I can't tell if they're on the screen. Can anybody tell me if they're?
Sorry, sir, we're still trying to get them in. We're having some IT troubles.
Okay. Well, maybe we need to shift then, Melissa, if that's okay. We'll shift to the adult panel. Can we do that?
Yep, I've just done that. The caregiver panel is up, and we have Carolyn Gita and Takora Jones and Kim Perry.
All right, thank you. And so what I just said about the voice of lived experience applies to this panel as well. We have adults who have experienced the system in different circumstances and have their own stories, their own expertise, and own wisdom to share with us as we move forward in this transformational effort. So I'd like to introduce Carolyn Jeter, Takora Jones, and Kim Perry, who have stories to tell us and insights to tell us. And so I want to make sure that they're on and we can see them. Are they on screen?
We have Takora.
All right. Well, Takora, you and I might just have a conversation this morning.
That works for me, Lyman.
Well, how about this, Takora? Why don't we start with you just sharing a few minutes of your own story, how it is that you came into contact with the child welfare system, and just tell us what your experience is there in South Carolina.
Well, first I have to say that I am a native. I was born right here in the capital city over on Fort Jackson, Moncrief Hospital. So I'm a technical home girl, and I love my state. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
My experience with the Department of Social Services in South Carolina started over 30 years ago. And my very first inclination that there was such a thing as a social service department was when a caseworker showed up to my house and gave me a big black plastic bag, one of those like 55-gallon ones, said, "Put your stuff in here. We're taking you from here. And put your sister's stuff in here. We're taking them too." Now I knew what was going on. I disclosed to a elementary teacher and someone I still love dearly, and she did what she had to do as a mandated reporter. So that was my very first knowledge that there was a system of social services, or there were people, there was an agency out there somewhere who could come into your home and remove you from a circumstance.
Thanks, Takora. I actually neglected to mention that Takora's voice is sought after outside of South Carolina. Casey Family Programs works with her and a number of other venues to bring her voice into these conversations. So I just want to, again, highlight that and recognize her as a community expert in this conversation. So Takora, talk a little bit about your experience. I know you have shared in other venues your experience with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and just talk a little bit about your journey through that, those issues with your adverse childhood experiences, and then what you also have to share about the generational impact of adverse childhood experiences.
All right, well, good people, I'm telling you the truth today. So what you hear from me is my expertise, which is how people end up needing the social services. And I have to say that because I don't know where we would be without Department of Social Services. I value the work that you all do there, but also having had those experiences, I know intimately what needs to be done differently. So in speaking of adverse childhood experiences, if you're familiar with it at all, there's the original studies about 10 questions, and you kind of scored from that. So I'm a 10 of 10 on that ACEs score. So as a child, it was difficult, and I don't really know how better to explain it. You get used to situations, you get used to being treated a certain way, you get used to dealing with trauma, and it's not easy, but you push on and you try your best, right? And you grow up in a society, and I lived in foster care, kinship care, and congregate care. Graduated out of congregate care. No permanency. There was nowhere for me. There was no home, no one that wanted me particularly. There was no supports. There were no friends. The children's home said, "Oh, you're done now, so you can't come back here." And so I walked into this world as a ward of the state, and that was it. If you can imagine, sure.
Takora, So, how old were you when that transition took place?
So at that time, we were out of the home I was around 12, just before my 12th birthday. And by the time I was 17, I had gone through summer school so that I could graduate early. And I was a freshman in college at 17, a few months after my 17th birthday. School was a place where I was safe, and so I thrived there. So moving forward, after a life of adverse experiences, bad relationships, not being seen or heard by people who you would expect to love you and support you and guide you and shape you, I came out a little misshapen, I guess. I'm having to figure out a lot of things on my own. And then I started having children. And I believe that part of that was to give myself the family that I never really had. The surrounding of love and comfort and somebody who would be there with me. And that permanency, it really matters. Just having that, it really matters. So I went into parenthood with no skills I loved them, but I didn't know what I was doing, and I'd only experienced adversity. So how do you raise healthy, happy, thriving children like that? Lyman, it got hard, and I fell short, and my children experienced many of the same adverse experiences that I did. And when we're talking about abuse, we're talking about all of the kinds of abuse. And so then again, I was back into that place I was as a child with my children having this experience. So, this adversity on adversity, and not to mention here as a Black female in South Carolina, the generations of adversity that were already part of the social system, that existed. My oldest daughter ended up, there's a lot of mental health concerns in my family. And that adversity, pound on adversity, it's very obvious in my family dynamic. And there's ways around it. And that's why I became an adverse childhood experiences trainer. But I wanted to know, how can we fix this? How can we make things better?
So DeQuincey, can you talk a little bit? I do want to talk more about your family, and as much as you're willing to share, and I so appreciate your willingness to share. We don't take it lightly that sharing one's story is easy to do. So just want to appreciate you for that. With respect to your own experience with adverse childhood experiences, what was missing for you from your experience with the system, from your support transitioning to adulthood? Knowing what you know now, what would have helped make a difference for you back then?
Man, Lyman, my sixth grade teacher, her name is Barbara Thomas, call her Mama T. She looked at me when I told her about the sexual abuse, and she told me, "You're going to be okay. It's going to be hard, but you're going to be okay." And that one conversation is the conversation that allowed me to be okay. She gave me a touch point. She said to me, I've had a rough life. She shared with me her experience, and she said to me, "You can do it." So that one thing, and that was just one person. And for me, that was just enough. But if there were more people like that, more people who were engaged in understanding what happens to a person when they're experiencing trauma, what happens in the moment, in the moments after that, the week, the days, as the days continue, the support and the understanding. Now, yes, there was court mandated therapy and all of these things, but it wasn't someone who looked at me and said, "Hey, Takoria, hey, that was bad what happened to you." And what happened to you wasn't your fault. And the people who did those things to you, there's something wrong. And it's not anything you had done. So having someone sit with me and help me understand what I'm feeling, what I was going through as a child, understanding relationships, understanding what that is supposed to look like. As I grew into an adult, I would have had a better sense of how to navigate, how to stand up for myself, how to be worthy. And that probably would have led to me not feeling like I had to sell drugs to make money or be involved in. So I got a felony charge for that. It probably would have led me to understanding that discipline doesn't have to be corporal, that you can set standards for your children and teach them how to do that. That would have kept me out of DSSs. That would have led to my children not being traumatized. And that would have led to me not having that interfacing with DSS. There was an instance, Lyman, and I have to share this because it's on me right now. That it's only about 3 years ago. I graduated from college, go UofSC, and I got pregnant like 3 weeks later, and it was a very interesting time. But you know that 5 kids later, on my 6th kid, the relationship with the last 3 kids' father was not that great. And we were living with him, but we weren't together. We were just living in his house. And I didn't have a job because I had a record and I had a little kid and I didn't have anybody to keep him, and I couldn't access childcare because there wasn't, ABC vouchers aren't available like that. And I was stuck, and we didn't have any money. We didn't have any food. The water was off because he didn't want us there. And so my daughter reported it to her therapist, and I got a case. And I was not charged, but I was involved because I was the custodial parent. But I had applied for food stamps, Lyman, but they told me I couldn't get it because we were living with my biological kid's father. And he wasn't just my boyfriend. He was actually my kid's father. So I had to include his income, and his income took us out of the range. Mm-hmm. So that was we were denied EBT because I was living in the home of my biological kid's father, although he was not assisting or providing support. And so therefore I got a case several weeks down the line because of lack of food in the house and basic needs. And that's me. This is me. We're talking 3 years ago. Yeah. 3 little years ago. So things are really, really, your policies and your practices and your procedures affect living, breathing, crying mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles and aunts and cousins and people who love children and our children. Our children are, what did I hear? That children are 25% of the population, but 100% of the future, right?
Yeah.
100%.
That's good, Victoria. Well, you just identified, I think, a theme around some of the policies and practices that are in place in our social service systems that perhaps inhibit well-being of children and families, and we need to rethink some of that and how we can dismantle some of the structures that potentially cause harm or force families to enter the system formally in order to access support. Can you talk a little bit about your experience of having a case filed against you and what happened with you and your children? As much as you feel comfortable sharing, we very much appreciate it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I love talking and I love sharing. Sharing is caring, and I care about this. We can do this. We can make these changes and put little supports in and put the little bit of structure that we need to better support strong, healthy families in South Carolina. So I will talk to you all day. So now, in the last time I mentioned crying, so now we're getting into the cussing part, right? We're getting into the part that you want to cuss a little bit because you're like, what the heck? I'm trying here. So the EBT denial, that I was cussing a lot around that. And then the particular caseworker, the one thing she offered me was that she could take my kids. That was what she offered me consistently. You can voluntarily give them up until you get yourself together. There were times when I feel like, not because of anything personal, that some caseworkers just don't have the support or the understanding or the ability to use language in a way that is strengthening. And I don't blame them. I'm so glad to hear about Dean Pitner over there at the College of Social Work, hoping that that is including education at that level of trauma-informed and understanding how to allow the human experience to exist between two people. A caseworker and a parent that is at their worst, having their worst day, having one of their worst days, because you don't know how many came before that. You just happen to show up at that moment. But teaching that connection, teaching even the connectability, because some of them, don't even understand that, hey, what was that? Families cannot be invisible to us. Well, there shouldn't be any more us, y'all. It's we. We are in this. Y'all are part of some families. Everybody's part of a family. So we are each other. We each other in this human capacity. So that is one of the things that really was hard, that I feel like the caseworkers and the system itself just is not inclined to support the framework so much. Like if I had a job, I could have had food, but I had a record, and I couldn't shake that record. And that's part of the system in South Carolina. I couldn't live in housing, which would have been very helpful because I had a record. They're just ways, they're just opportunities to support concrete needs, and to take that, if you can't love your kids, thinking, because poverty does not having money in my bank account does not mean I don't have love in my heart. Those two things, and that does not mean that love is, that does not mean I can't love my kids because I can't pay my bills. So those two things are just too intertwined, and they really need to separate. That is one of the biggest things with parents and caregivers, especially kinship caregivers, that tears things apart. Not having that concrete support is then, oh, you don't work hard enough for your kids, or you can't make this happen. Well, I'm a single mom trying to work 2 minimum paying jobs to support 5 kids, 6 kids. How am I going to where do I get to spend time with them? So just understanding that, and how do I get to shape them and mold them? Understanding those kinds of things are really important.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tori. I think taking one point definitely away from that, there's several points that you made that were amazing, but one point in particular is that we have to make sure our systems don't look and treat our families based on the worst thing that ever happened to them or the worst thing they ever did. And you have to be able to look beyond that, supports that help them heal and become well. Can you tell us a little bit about what your current situation is with your children?
Well, they are 22, 19, 17, 14, 8, and 4. And everybody's at home except for the 22-year-old, but she calls enough and comes over enough to where she's, and a funny thing about kids, they love you as hard as they can, but they also show you who you are in some very straightforward. They reflect you. They reflect the life that they've lived with you. They reflect the environment. Is it nature or nurture? When you're in mom's home, it's both, really. So my kids are doing well now. My oldest child has experienced many mental health issues that led us back into the system, where there was, she was a vulnerable adult. and ended up in a very serious trafficking situation. And she was kept away from us. I couldn't even see her. I didn't understand, and I still don't understand how the system was supportive to our family and keeping my daughter at a motel and not allowing her to talk to me. So we're still struggling, and DSS got called back to my house about 2 years ago, a year ago, because there was a fight, and there was some concern about my oldest daughter's mental health, that I wasn't attending to it properly. So this, I have a child that is an Ivy League student. She's going to Brown in January. I have a child who was at another top school, and the other 3 are still in the process. But they're all good kids, Lyman, and I learned so much about the protective factors and about me. I'm a pretty persistent individual, and I knew that I didn't want my kids to grow up like I did, but I didn't know enough to stop some things, but I knew enough to try and try and try and try and try and try and try. And I learned so much through the Alliance, the Children's Trust Fund here in South Carolina, Protective Factors. They allowed me to be trained in that, and I learned ways to make things better. When I had a abuse case with Department of Social Services, I got a parent peer support person, and she was a single mom, so she knew what that life was like. So she was able to talk to me in words that I was familiar with. She was able to understand situations about kids' fathers and daycare and relationships that would have been hard to explain to someone who had not had that same experience. So it's been a ride. But it's brought me here, and I hope that I've been able to represent the expertise that we have as outward-facing users of this system. There are ways that you all don't, that from the inside out, that you all don't understand, because we are using it. You are providing these things for us, but as users, there's a different experience. So us, the voice of the expertise at the table, I know sometimes it's uncomfortable because we come with a lot of emotions. Perhaps we come with experience, and it might make you uncomfortable when we say this was not good and this didn't work, but we are here together, and it is in that togetherness that we can make what we both know as users, outward users, and inward staff and structure, practice policies and procedures, as all of that we can come together and make this what we need to see those thriving families, to have those strong families in South Carolina. I mean, it's a beautiful place. We're beautiful people. We put it on our license tag. So this is definitely something that that we can do together, that we have to do, that we must do together.
Awesome. We actually have the other caregivers who have joined us by phone, so we're going to get their voices in here. But before we transition to that, DeQuincey, first of all, I want to just acknowledge you for your expertise and encourage all who are listening to lean into what you're saying and to open the door, open the space in the room and in the conversations for your voice and voices like yours. Before I transition to the other caregivers, I want to give you a minute or two to share with the people on this webinar what you want to share with them. We have the director of DSS, Director Leach is on. We have Children's Trust. We have the University of South Carolina. We have all the players that are going to be integral in creating this 21st century child and family well-being system. What are the top 2 or 3 things you want to share with them?
Every agency that you just mentioned has a piece of the puzzle. Mental health, the CBCAP agency, Children's Trust, of course, Department of Social Services. All of you all have pieces of the puzzle, and it is necessary that you bring these pieces and not keep them to yourself and try to make another picture. This is our future that we're talking about. This is 50 years from now. What can our state, what can our nation be? We can be a collaborative effort in strengthening families. And so to you all, I would have to say that go home tonight and look at your families. Look at your friends and your loved ones and imagine if they never had someone in their life. And just imagine if they were just plucked away from you in some way and you knew they were, around, but they were just in a very bad place. And the whole, just imagine that. And what would you want for that person that you love, that person that you embrace, the person whose smile that you want to see? What would you want for that person to help them out of that hole? And knowing that you have pieces of the ladder, knowing that other agencies that you work with or other families that you know have pieces of the ladder, how would you help that person that you love? Because if you can figure that out, then we can figure this out. Then we can do this together. And I do want to thank Federation of Families South Carolina for supporting this cohort to work with the Department of Social Services to further extend that lived expertise voice at the table. Director Leach, you know that I'm proud of you, and I stand with you. And I know that you not only believe in this work, but you are walking in this work. And there's a little bit of a difference to just believing in a thing than knowing it and living it. So I ask each of you to look at your authenticity, look at who you are and what you value, look at your family and your loved ones and ask, do you show up for South Carolina's family like you show up for your loved ones? How would you want that done? And I thank you for your time.
DeQuincey, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, your insights, your expertise. I think obviously we take so much from what you say, but that last thing you said is what we call a standard of our own. If it's not good enough for our own children, it's not good enough for anybody's child. And so I just thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights. Okay, we're going to shift. We've got a couple of other adult caregivers, parents, to share their story. Sorry for the technical issues, but we're going to bring them on by phone. And I think actually one of them may be on Karen Bryant's screen. So we want to bring them in and make sure that you all can hear me as I ask you these questions. If Carolyn Jeter, if you are on, we would love to hear a few minutes of your story right now, how you came into contact with the system and just tell us a little bit about your story.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Thank you. I actually aged out the system. I am one of 7 siblings. We all aged out of the system. It was very apparent early on that my mother had some extensive mental health issues and fathers weren't involved. So it started early on where if I'm going to mention the stigma here, when DSS was coming into the neighborhood, because number one, it was frequent, and number two, you would see all the kids scatter. Everybody would run, doors shutting, and we knew somebody was about to get their kids taken. That's part of my personal history, and I also have a history in relation to my children with DSS. And the common thing with my situation personally and the situation with my kids is like when you get to a certain level of care, wherever that may be from, whether it's DSS or mental health, it's like the ball is dropped, meaning, okay, we've done our part, we're finished, and we're gone. And you're left with, where do I go from here? how do I deal with the continued situations? And for a while, I felt like it was a cycle. Then I aged out the system and then had to deal with the same system in reference to my children.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Can you talk a little bit about your family situation now, where you are with your children and how things are now?
It's very strange. Our reunification process, we actually only had one meeting, and even in that meeting, I remember asking, "Hey, what happens after this?" You know, the circumstances of with my children, the mental health issues and all that, the communication, all that stuff was still there. And everybody walked away. And even to this day, it's hard to just be a family. It's hard to just be what we used to be when they were in grade school, where we could sit down and have dinner together and laugh and talk and things of that sort. And although they have their separate mental health counseling and all that, the uniqueness of the family gathering is just gone. It's not there.
Wow. Carolyn, you have something to say about wellness and the assistance that you've received or you provide in terms of peer supports to other families. Can you just take the next minute or two and talk about your ideas around what wellness looks like and what kind of supports would have benefited you and can benefit other families?
Change any system, whether that be child and welfare, SCDC, juvenile justice, any system. I believe that you start with the people who have the inside experience of that system, because they have the knowledge of what would have worked for them. And in the various things I've been through, even the various things I've been through with my children, I've been able to use that trauma in those circumstances and help everyday people. And that's the amazing part of the journey, and actually a passion of mine. And I think once you get a person to understand and realize that, hey, I can use these traumas to help someone else get through their situation, then that the person develops an area of wellness, and in turn it's like paying it forward. They gain their wellness. Keep it in mind, wellness is a journey, but they gain their wellness, and in turn they teach another person that same wellness, and the cycle just continues. And I actually have this vision in my mind I've had probably for the last 5 years now of seeing South Carolina being the nation's leader in wellness collaborative opportunities and all of that for the entire nation.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful vision. And that's part of what we're here to talk about today. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your insights, and thank you for your willingness to share your story. Kim, are you there? Kim Perry, are you there?
Yes, sir. I am here.
Hey, Kim, thank you for joining us. And again, sorry. Oh, there you are. You're on live. Wonderful. Thank you. You work in the system. You're a social worker, but you have an experience as a relative caregiver. Can you talk for a few minutes about your experience and how you came to be a relative caregiver?
Sure. It's a little terrifying and it's kind of hard for me to talk about, but I got a call in the middle of the night from my nephew, and he was calling me because the police had been called. EMS was coming out to pick up my sister. Her husband had beat her. My 3-year-old nephew was running around with a shirt full of blood, and the kids came home with me that night. And that's when I learned that she had been involved with the Department of Social Services for some time, and I had absolutely no idea that it had gotten to that point, or that it was anywhere near that bad. So I knew the kids couldn't come home, so I got on the phone trying to figure out, you know, who was working with her at DSS, and finally spoke with a caseworker, and they made me, at that time, it was alternative caregiver for my 3 nephews, along with my parents. And we had them for a couple of years after that.
Can you talk a little bit about that experience for you? How you know, kind of what the process was, and how things turned out for your nephews?
Sure. It's not really a great story, but the kid, like I said, the kids were placed with me as alternative caregiver. Just a few months after that, we went to court, and I was given legal custody, and the DSS case was closed, and that was really without much support at all. By that point, I had called and finally got my youngest, Joseph, qualified for vouchers so that he could go to daycare so that I could work. And they had all 3 gotten qualified for Medicaid finally. That was really hard. But so at that point, when the case was closed and I was given legal custody, they had those 2 things, but I didn't have any financial way to support them. So I just, you know, I just did the best I could on my own at that point with my parents' help. And the guardian ad litem did stand up for me about child support, and child support got started, but that just ended up with my sister in jail. And so it was really, really a hard couple of years. My sister did divorce her abusive husband and remarried and went back to court that after that 2nd year and got custody herself, you know, through private action.
So during that time, and knowing what you know now and the work that you do, what would have made it better for you? What would have been a way the system could respond differently in support of in support of you supporting your nephews?
Well, like you said, I'm a social worker. I'm a master's level social worker. So while that was happening, I knew enough about child welfare. I didn't work in the child welfare system at all, but I knew enough about the system to know that this wasn't right. Like, I was doing better for my nephews than foster care could, and foster care is really expensive and hard on kids. So I knew it wasn't right, but if they could have, acknowledged that, been supportive, help me navigate that relationship with my sister, just provided just some supports there, make it easy for me to get vouchers, just a little bit of help, financially, any of those things would have really helped. And I just think just a little bit of help would have been helpful.
Yes, of course. Well, it's not timely for your situation, but I can attest to the fact that South Carolina has greatly elevated their support of kinship families over the last several years. So I think your wisdom has been heeded, and while there's yet work to do to continue that and to continue to support relative caregivers, things have improved. What do you want to tell the system leaders? What do you want to tell the people that are on the phone? What advice do you have for Director Leach, for the rest of the leaders that have joined us today for this discussion about systems transformation and child well-being, child and family well-being?
I want to thank you all for the opportunity. I appreciate the fact that you're hearing our voices. People have a lot more lived experience than me. I'm glad that you're listening to us, and I am grateful for the opportunity. You know, just by virtue of the position I'm in with a private agency, I've been able to witness some of the work that South Carolina is doing to support kinship caregivers. And I just want to say that that is wonderful, and let's get all of that down to the front lines. Let's equip and support those caseworkers, because I know that that caseworker had every good intention, or actually it was several caseworkers just in a matter of a few months, but I know those are good people who want to do good work. They're not doing it just, you know, for a job. They're doing it because they want to do good work, and I want leadership to know you have to equip and support them on the front line, because they're the ones that are talking to us. They're the ones that are you know, interacting with us, and they need to know that they have leadership support for doing the right thing by families in South Carolina.
That's some amazing advice. Take care of the workforce, because they're the ones delivering the services. Kim, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being willing to open yourself up and share your wisdom and experience with the folks that are on the line today. And I want to also thank again Tokoria and Carolyn, both of you, all three of you women are amazing. Your wisdom, your insights, your expertise are so necessary in this discussion. And I hope that everyone listening will take away something from this conversation, at the very least, that the voice of lived experience, the voice of our community experts, our families, our young people who have experienced the system are so central to this discussion. Anything that moves forward in terms of transformation must be centered on young people and families that have or potentially will experience the system. So please join me in thanking these three amazing ladies, Carolyn, Tokoria, Kim, for your time and for your willingness to share your stories with us this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And with that, I think we're going to try to shift to our youth panel.
That is correct.
Thanks, Melissa. I think we have both Maj and Lamaja on the phone, if I'm not mistaken. Just want to check in. Can you all hear me? Maj, Lamaja, can you hear me? Sorry, Malaja, sorry, I mispronounced your name.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can hear you too.
Thank you. Apologies, Malaja, for mispronouncing your name. Welcome, welcome. These two young people are phenomenal. And so they have their own stories to tell. And just want to start with that. So Malaja, would you mind leading us off and just telling us a little bit about your experience, how you came in contact with the social service system, and just tell us your experience in that system.
Yes. So I first entered the foster care system when I was 13 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And it was right after my birthday, so it was during the summertime. Me and my mother and my youngest sister at the time, we had just moved from Philadelphia to South Carolina, and we were starting off brand new. So we were starting off from scratch, you know, home, no car, job. We were starting off from scratch. And so we moved in with my great-grandmother. We actually originally moved in with my mom's mother. And then they had some encounters, so we ended up moving in with my great-grandmother. And from there, there was like a lot of strain in the household. And so my grandmother just thought that my mom couldn't necessarily take care of us under the circumstances. So she did contact social services, and they did come to pick me and my youngest sister up. And we spent a year and a half in the system. I was in a group home with my sister, and then I got moved into another group home. And then from there, we finally were reunited together. That would have been the last time for my sister, but that was going to be the first of many times for me. I've been in and out of foster care since I've been that age, which was 13, and I left when I was 17. As far as like many experiences in the system, the unfortunate
unfortunately, the bad did outweigh the good, but I was able to meet like a lot of people along the way that have helped shift and mold me into the person that I am and becoming today. There's a lot of things that are very hidden in the system that you don't know about until you actually experience it, and it's really ugly. It's sad too, because the people that are supposed to represent you, like your foster parents and your case managers, mostly them, don't necessarily really believe in you. And I don't know if it's because if they've been doing this for a long time, so sometimes you just have to learn how to detach your feelings from cases like this, or if it's like they're just not invested in it.
Thanks, Malaja. Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your experience. We know that it's not always easy to do that, and sharing your story with a group of people like this. Would you talk a little bit about what you think might have made it better for you? What could the folks that you talked about what could they have done differently that would have made it better?
That's a good question. Nobody's never really kind of asked me that before. I probably would say just having somebody that believes you when you tell them all these things that's happening. You know, when I was in the system and when I was in like different foster homes and group homes, every time I got the chance to talk to my caseworker or see my caseworker, I would immediately tell them, because I wrote a list down every time just in case, and I would immediately tell them like all the things that are happening, thinking that some change would happen, whether it's me being moved or maybe like a meeting with me and my foster parent, and that didn't happen at all. And it was more so like, okay, well, you have to make it work. You have to do this. And it's like, me as a child, why should I have to level with an adult that is supposed to help me? I've already left one bad situation just to come and be mistreated in another. And I felt like if I would have had somebody that can at least say, I believe you, but let me just tell you right now, we don't have the materials. We're not under the circumstances. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. Tell us about your situation now, Malaja. How are things now? Tell us what you're doing. Malaja, did we lose you?
Elijah, can you hear me?
Uh-oh, seems like we've lost her. Well, let's shift over. Maj, are you still there?
Yes, sir. I'm still here.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. You have a remarkable story yourself, and you're on screen. Awesome. Awesome. Great to see you. Hey, similar to the question for Lamaja, tell us about your, sorry, I messed up her name again, Malaja. Please tell us your story, how you came into the system and kind of your experience.
Yeah. Pretty short story. I guess let's do this. So for about a good 3 years, a little longer than that, but a good 3 years, my mom really couldn't hold a job. All right, so it's just me and my mom, and she couldn't really hold a job. Wasn't really sure why. You know, just she would apply, she wouldn't get it, or something like that, or just she would get the job, she'd go into the work, you know, and then a week later, 2 weeks later, she'd lose the job. Eventually I was like, it's got to be her, you know, it has to be her. And well, regardless of whose fault it was, right, eventually things were just pretty bad, and I didn't really, like, you know, we had no money, so we were like homeless for a little bit. And then you know, eventually you exhaust your resources. If you're not working, you know, you're not making money, you're just spending. So we had no money. So eventually went to Texas, I lived with an aunt, and then about 2 months later, this is my sophomore year of high school, I moved back and really noticed my mom was different, right? She was very changed. She had eventually got a home due to like help from, you know, various resources and whatnot. So we had an apartment, but mentally she was just much different. Later I found out that she was schizophrenic and whatnot, and she had other mental illnesses, but at the time it was definitely just a big part of the schizophrenia. And so she just eventually, we still had no money, you know, she obviously couldn't get a job, she's schizophrenic. And so we had a home, but food was just, you know, food stamps, or you would walk to go get, just, you know, whatever there was, you know, at like, I guess, I don't know what you'd call them, but places where they would give food to like homeless people. And, you know, that's how we ate. And for a little while, she just really got more sick. And eventually it was really bad where she would, you know, threaten or hurt herself. And to me, there was no way out, right? And so I was like, I don't know how to help her, but clearly nothing's going to change and nothing's going to get better. And so one day, I guess, let's say it was like, you know, it was the first quarter of my sophomore year, around the end in October, I went to my guidance counselor and I was like, hey, mom's in trouble. We gotta figure something out. And so I just told him the whole deal. And I didn't, like, you know, I'm not really safe there either. And about 5 days later, I moved to, or I guess I met my caseworker. And from there, I went into the foster care system.
So talk a little bit about that experience, Maj. You actually went straight into group care, right?
Yes, sir. So I met my caseworker, and then roughly, I guess, like, let's say 4 or 5 days later, she was like, you know.
You just muted yourself, Maj.
You're right. I did do that. I called it Miracle Hill Boys Home, and I lived there for about a year, and from there I went into a foster home, and where I am currently, and yeah.
So share, you have an interesting perspective on your experience in group care. We'd love for you to share with the audience kind of how that was for you, how that worked out for you, and what the, you know, talk a little bit about the best and worst parts of that for you.
Yeah. So initially, when I went into the foster care system, I did want to go to a foster home, right? I didn't really know what a group home was, so I wanted to go to a foster home. And from my understanding, my caseworker wanted me to go to a foster home, but they're just, you know, it just didn't work out. I guess they're just, I don't know. There just wasn't any. So at group homes where I went, and there, you know, to be honest, it was a safe haven for me. Home obviously just wasn't it, and so, you know, when I told my guidance counselor, you know, I wanted to get into, I had to get into foster care because it was like, you know, I needed to, you know, help myself, I guess. But in the group home, you know, honestly, everything that I needed was there. You know, from there, I started running, and I got a job, and, you know, sooner or later, you know, I was able to join the track team, and my caseworkers were able to organize like rides with like 3 different foster moms that could give me rides, you know, to back from practice and whatnot. I was really accommodated well, and, you know, that ride system was how I met my foster parents.
Okay. Tell us that story.
Yeah. So, like I said, they organized 3 different parents, and they were able to give me rides, and that was so I ended my sophomore year on the track team, and they gave me rides. And around my junior year, when cross country started, you know, I was like, I want to do that too. So yeah, but the rides weren't really working out too well, and I think, you know, parents are just a little busy, and it was really hard to do that. I know it was a lot to ask, but eventually, I guess my foster mom, Tiffany Garlington, one day she's just like, hey, do you want to come in and move in? And, you know, after I'd spent like, you know, how many car rides with her, you know, she just knew me well enough, and she, you know, her family accepted me, and I've been adopted, you know, but I'm not adopted, but so now I live with them.
Nice. How long? Matt?
Yeah, it's been 2 years. Yeah, 2 years, 2 years and a month.
Great story. And tell us what you're doing now. You're in school.
I go to Clemson University. I'm studying pre-business. Hopefully get into marketing. Just working. I'm saving money for the future.
Nice.
I guess I'm on this youth council.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, and your voice is so important. Hey, you told when we talked earlier, you told me a little bit about your current relationship with your mother and your desires for what you want to do professionally to actually support her. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. So yes, my mother had schizophrenia. So what ended up happening is I went into care, which is all part of the plan. I just want to say that, I went into care, and, the idea was that if someone could go see her, right? Like, so they obviously, measures out of the home, something's going on. They go see my mom. They would see how we were living. And then someone would be, hey, like, obviously this woman is sick. We got to take her somewhere. And that did happen about a year later. And it was just a really, I guess, a good series of events. Eventually, she wasn't really taking care of the home. And so the apartment complex was going to evict her, right? And so, to be honest, I'm not even sure how it worked out because I wasn't there to see it happen. But I do know my brother was there, and there was cops, and there was one of my caseworkers, and there was cops, and so they kind of saw her. She was just obviously wasn't well, and from there she went to Marshall Pickens, and she's since been put on some medication, and so she's now in assisted living, which is much better, and she's like much more cognitive and can understand, and she's doing well. And so she's really a big part of my plan. I've always just, not that I don't want to say like, money is like everything, but a big plan is to take care of her, and to do that, I have to have money. So there's no way around it. And I've received a lot of help from just other people, and I feel like I'm kind of in debt to some people, and so financially, I just want to be able to help others. So that's the goal.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Mark. Thank you so much for that. Last question for you. You have some recommendations for the system. You have some recommendations for DSS and for this focus on systems transformation. Tell us what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So when I first went into care, right, I wanted to go to foster home. I think most kids probably do. Maybe I'm sure there's some that don't. But from my understanding, my caseworker, Kayla was her name, and I guess like my initial caseworker, and she was like, she thought I was a good kid. Yeah. She didn't, I don't know. She thought I was. So she was like, you need to go to foster home. Like, I don't want you to put you in a group home. She's like, oh, you're gonna, she just wanted to put me, I don't know, near certain kids, I don't know, whatever she want to call it. But she's like, you need to go to foster home. But there obviously weren't any. And so I went to Miracle Boys Home. And so it worked out for me, right? I ended up going to foster home like a year later. But I found out like a few months ago that Miracle Boys Home is closed down, right? The one in Greenville, South Carolina, at least, is closed down, and I know that there's kind of this push for normalcy, right? Which I understand that, right? Like there should be, and I think, but a part of that push is eliminating group homes, and I think that's kind of evident because Miracle is closed down, unless there's another reason, but I don't know for sure. But I just know that if that is the push, to close group homes, well, for my case, I wasn't, a kid with, behavioral problems. I didn't have a criminal record. I wasn't, I wasn't like stealing. I didn't do anything. Like I wasn't like a necessarily, not that they're bad and good kids, but I wasn't a bad kid, and there wasn't a foster home for me. So, I lived with 18 other dudes, in a group home, and I could say that I was a little bit better than some of them, and so I just don't know what the hope is for all of us, for teenagers like me to find foster homes. and I see that there may be some group homes being closed down, and I just don't know I don't think it's kind of realistic. But I do know this, and maybe there would be more foster homes, because I always hear from my foster parents, they're always like complaining. They're like, oh, I gotta do this work, I gotta do this, do that in here, like to like, I guess, maintain their status, I guess, as foster parents. I guess I would say, just if there's any way, try and make it easier. If you want more foster parents, which I assume is the goal, then I guess you got to make it easier to become a foster parent, and not only become one, but just to maintain it. Yeah, I guess that's my advice.
I appreciate that. We all appreciate it so much, man. That's some good advice. We need to make sure that we remove barriers for young people being in normal situations, normal homes, and if we're going to dismantle certain parts of the system, we need to make sure we build up the other parts of the system so young people have those resources. Thanks again for sharing your story. You're amazing. We are expecting big things from you, and keep bringing your voice into this conversation. All right.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you. Let me check in to see one last time to see if Malaja has rejoined us. Malaja, are you there?
Elijah.
I'm here.
Hey, Malaja, I want to give you an opportunity to share with the people on the call today what you would like to see changed in the system. Anything you'd like to see changed, any advice you have for the people on the call today?
When a child ages out of care, I would like to see that even if you probably didn't go all the way through to the age of 18, that they're still able to receive some type of help, because not everybody still has like family. Just to have some kind of support, because it's hard, especially being young, trying to branch out into independency without having anybody helping you or any advice. While we're in the system, just kind of having better advocates, because when I was there, I felt like nobody really cared, and I was on my own. The only thing I was worried about was leaving.
That's excellent. And Malaja, before we let you go, tell us what you're doing now.
Right now, I am enrolled in Midland Technical College. I'm in the pre-nursing program, aiming to get my DSS and register in nursing. I'm working 2 jobs now. I am at Pitner Health in phlebotomy. I'm a phlebotomist, and I am working at Walgreens. I'm currently in the process of getting my license for pharmacy technician, so that I can have that as a small part-time job, because I'm actually really kind of tired of retail. And I'm just trying to strive to be successful. That's all.
Well, we have no doubt that you will be successful, and we just thank you again for your time, for your willingness to share your story, and we will be watching to see how things turn out for you. And also just want to make sure that, as I mentioned to Matt, your voice is so important in this conversation. So please stay at the table, please stay with us, and please bring your wisdom, your insights, and your expertise into this conversation. So thank you both, Maj and Malaja, and I invite everyone else on the call to thank them. Thank you all for staying with us. Sorry about the technical glitches, but I think if nothing else, you heard that the voice of lived experience, the voices of our parents, our caregivers, the adult providers, their experience, the voices of the young people that joined us this morning are so important in this conversation. They are more than the worst thing that they ever did or the worst thing that ever happened to them. They have expertise and wisdom to share with us as we build this 21st century child and family well-being system. With that, I thank you all and wish you a great rest of your day. Turn it back to you, Melissa.
Melissa, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Lyman, and thanks to the panelists. Please stick around. We actually are now in our question and answer portion, and we have a little bit more time, so that's great. It also offers the Department of Social Services, and Emily Parks is going to moderate this to respond to anything that you might have. But if you hadn't noticed, you do have a chat box where you actually can type in questions for the panelists or for the Department of Social Services about so far what we're sharing in terms of our future in South Carolina for child and family well-being. With that being said, I'm happy to turn it over to our Chief of Staff for the Department of Social Services, Emily Parks.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you so much to all of our panelists, to Takoria, Carolyn, Kim, Malaysia, and Maj. I can speak for everyone on the call today to just say thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for being authentic and for sharing your experiences. We've got a lot of amazing affirmations in the chat function, so I would encourage all of our panelists to go and read those because everyone is just very grateful for sharing your stories with us today. And we've got some great questions too. So I'm going to start out with a question for our caregiver panel. What do you think as kinship caregivers, what do you think kinship caregivers need to know when supporting bio parents and children? So that question is for Takoria, Carolyn, or Kim.
Supporting kinship caregivers in their relationship, like for me with my relationship with my sister.
Yeah.
Okay, so healthy boundaries, helping. I think the biggest thing that could have helped would be for somebody from the agency to explain to my sister that there had to be some limits. When it's coming from me, like we have a different relationship, so she just felt like she could just run all over me. And you know, I take responsibility for the fact that, you know, I was responsible for helping her see that she couldn't, but it was so difficult. She loves her kids. I know she does. She wants to take good care of her kids, but she just wasn't able to at that time, you know. So if I could have gotten some support in enforcing those boundaries, helping her understand the difference, you know, the difference in the relationship for the time being, and help me support her in her treatment, I think that would have been what was needed there.
Thank you, Kim. Takoria or Carolyn, anything else you want to add to that question about what caregivers need to know when supporting bio parents and children?
Well, when I went into kinship care, I came to my grandparents, and they were senior citizens, and they had a hostile, volatile, isolating, moody, hurt, traumatized teenager, and they really didn't know what to do about that. So I really feel like, and they tried to find therapy. I remember we went to the United Way a lot, but there was nothing consistently there, right there, all the time, that kind of helped us understand each other. So I definitely feel that, like Kim was mentioning, that those relationship issues are there, and they're going to be there because as caregivers are traumatized too, you know, and knowing that these things were happening, and knowing that, you know, my loved ones have been in this adverse experience, and now they're coming to me with all of this on them, and now, you know, that co-trauma, I don't know if there's some term for it, but it's out there and it's real. And I really think supporting that, addressing that and supporting that is vital. Like one of the youth mentioned, it's foster care as well. They need that consistent support from one caseworker and not one every other 60 days in order to establish that consistent, trusting relationship that will then normalize that opportunity to say, hey, I need help. So that will then normalize that ability to say, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm afraid, and my kid needs help, and I need help, you know, because that's a big statement, especially here in South Carolina. We don't like to air our dirty laundry. We like to keep it clean and neat, and we don't want anybody to know, and we're going to smile, and we're going to say, bless her heart, and we're going to do all those things that we do in our. I love Southern hospitality, but in some ways it keeps us from reaching the parts that really need to be helped. So asking for help is important, and having those consistent relationships is important.
Yeah, thank you so much, DeQuincey. This next question is for our youth panelists, for Malaysia and Maj.
Emily, I'm sorry, it's Karen. Carolyn wanted to add something.
Oh, perfect.
Okay?
Thank you so much, Karen.
Carolyn, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you're on.
Hi, this is Carolyn. I would just like to add that the RAP module is a very good module because it could support all parties involved. It's a very good collaborative effort, everyone involved and surrounding that family. So the RAP module is a good module to consider.
All right. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you so much for sharing, Carolyn. All right, our next question is for our youth panelists, Malaysia and Maj. So as a youth in foster care, in your opinion, what was the most difficult aspect of being in foster care?
I can go. Well, I ran into problems like, I guess around the age of 18, trying to get car insurance, which is like relatively like it might actually be impossible. Like I'm not, the only reason I could get car insurance was because my brother worked for State Farm. And so through that, like if I didn't have a brother, I think I could go under his policy, you know, whatnot. So, you know, other than that, like I don't know how else someone could get insurance. I don't even know if there's an actual solution to that. But that was something that was pretty difficult. I guess like other things, you know, not every person's getting a car though, right? So I don't know if it's the biggest deal. That was a big problem I ran into.
Thank you for sharing. Malaysia, anything you wanted to add? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. So this next question is for all of our panelists, so feel free to chime in. What are the tools that you need to help support you? Or maybe when you were going through your experience, what tools did you need that you didn't have?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in because I think I'm probably gonna hit a lot of the points for a lot of us. It's hard to think back and say, well, what could I have used in a moment when I knew nothing about anything and my whole world was upside down and my glitter shaker was just on blast? You know, how do you go back to that? But the one thing that is consistent is support, and someone who understands what you need and understands the navigations that you have to do to recover from your trauma. And, you know, I think of adverse experiences and trauma as something like substance abuse. You have to recover from that experience. You have to figure out ways to get around, you know, what you previously used or what you were previously exposed to. So I think support, being consistent, being, again, a one caseworker, maybe two caseworkers, depending on how long your case is, but not, a rotating door of caseworkers who then have to hear your story again, have to get to know you. You have to get to know and trust and understand. And consistent support from supporters who are knowledgeable about human connection and meeting people where they are and connecting in a way that is, it's not checkbox, that is it's real. And like was mentioned, people don't do this work for nothing. They do this work for a reason. And tapping into that reason and allowing them to then express that, letting their, supervisors set up that environment that it is okay to care. It is okay to cry. It is okay to be worried. It is okay to, like, how can I help? It is okay to do that. I had one caseworker who showed up like that, and I was afraid he was going to lose his job. I was not sure if he was doing the right thing. I thought he was breaking rules, and I was really concerned. I was like, are you sure this is okay? He was like, yeah, I can do this. And he made things happen for me and my family that I was amazed. Like, I thought he was breaking the rules. Just to have more caseworkers fight for us, like break the rules for us. Wouldn't you want someone to do that for the person that you care about, the one that you love? So let me let somebody else talk.
Thank you so much, Decoria. Any other thoughts?
Just to build off that, because I think that's exactly it. An empowered caseworker who is in it with us, that we are not just going through a system and checking boxes. We are part of a change in this, in a strengthening my sister's family so that she can, raise them in a healthy environment. Somebody who's in it with us and wants to win it for the right reasons, not just to close the case and go on to the next one and start the new thing all over again. So empowered caseworkers that are willing to really support us in individual ways.
Thank you so much, Kim.
I'm about to on. Emily, we have Miss Carolyn that has something to add.
Great.
You're on, Miss Carolyn.
Hello again. I agree with everyone about the supports. I can remember when I aged out, the place I was sent to was Hannah House, which is an adult women's shelter. I had no clue or knowledge about adulting. I didn't even understand that if you work a job, you get paid for their work. And Hannah House was a Christian-based program, so there was no concern of me being able to understand and learn the things I needed to know for my life. And most of those things were learned by trial and error. And for my kids, again, extensive support just to see, since the bad event happened, how are things going? How are y'all doing? And sadly, with my 19-year-old, I see some of that same experiences I had with trying to navigate things when he's still dealing with the very issues that caused DSS to come into the home. So again, as some others have repeated, certainly extensive supports, and you can do that with peer supports. You can do that with people who have an understanding of navigating through systems long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right, our next question is for our youth panelists from Malaysia and Majd. What do you believe the agency needs to improve on to assist youth who are in care in thriving and being independent before they age out? So before turning 18, what can the department do better to prepare you to live independently?
I'm not sure if Malaysia's here, so I'll talk. But I would say, I guess I was just thinking about it. What was pretty important for me around the time of the boys' home, which was around I was 17, which is about when I started, is I got a job, right? And so with a job, you get money. And really, it was how to spend that money, like what I should do with the money. I feel like most of the kids that I lived with, they would get money and they would just go spend it, right? Like they literally they would spend their entire paycheck at like Walmart. Okay. And I think it's really important to, teach kids, what a savings account is and like a checking account. Maybe even at like, at the very least, like just like a 10% rule, like, save like 1/10 of the money you earn, as far as adulting, just saving for the future. I think a lot of kids need to hear that. Some clearly don't, right? So I would say that's a pretty big part in trying to have them grow up to be a big, a responsible adult.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. So this next question is for all of our panelists. What do you need now, so based on where you are right now in your current life situation, to help you or your family continue to be strengthened?
Well, I think that this opportunity to speak and share our lived expertise is what gives validity to my life for me. It puts the purpose in the pain. And again, there's a quote I heard on an Alliance webinar that unless you transform your pain, you will transmit it. And I've had enough of pain, and I don't want to continue that pain. So this experience, this here in this place as lived expertise, knowing that all that is in here can be shared to make things better, to strengthen families, to have youth come out of the system and know what they need to do. Like, yeah, Maj, who knew about, all I knew was stay away from credit cards. That's the only thing I knew about finances. That don't get a credit card. But other than that, I'm 45 now, and I'm just now understanding what that is like, fiscal responsibility. So continue to support us, because there are things that, little girl Takoria, little T, is still struggling with as 45-year-old mother, trying to be a professional in a career, so there's still things that I struggle with that you might not consider would be a hard thing for me. So just having this opportunity, and again, having those supports, knowing that I have friends like Lyman and Director Leach, and, people who care, that outside of my family, that care within the system, knowing that is there. So keep caring is what I'll say. Keep caring and putting that care forward. Smiling faces, beautiful places. Let's do that.
Emily, Miss Carolyn has something to add to that. Miss Carolyn, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All righty, you're on.
The main concern for me right now, something that still keeps me up at night, is the issues with my children and how they were affected from the lack in the reunification process. So if I could get what I needed now, it would be help me figure out how to repair the family unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Carolyn.
And that would kind of be the same for me. My sister, unfortunately, like I said, she got custody of the kids, moved to Florida, divorced that new husband. My parents had to go pick the kids up last year and we just did it private, no agency involvement. They had temporary custody. She got custody back. And just a couple weeks ago, I got a call from an investigator in Florida. So it's more like big picture wise, quality services that support the family, and the agency can't do it all, obviously, but quality services to address the root causes to prevent this cycle from keeping happening. You know, the relationship with my sister's never been repaired, never. There's still a lot of mistrust there, and there's still a lot of problems there. So we just need really quality services that really help families recover. Because like Lyman said,
Ms. Kim, if I could ask you a follow-up question, the services that you mentioned, the quality services that you and your family needed, what type of services do you think would have been most beneficial for your family when you were going through it initially and now?
Well, substance use services, you know, true like recovery interventions, domestic violence, family violence intervention, quality services there, mental health treatment, evidence-based services.
If I can chime in and include parenting, and that these services are not impossible to get, like we get automatic warm handovers that they know we're coming and that they're ready for us, and we don't have to come out of pocket, you know, because, you know, we're involved in the system as a order of the state. You know, those kinds of things should be available.
Great. Thank you both. Maj, anything you wanted to add? What you need as an individual, as a young adult, to be successful and to continue to be successful?
Well, I'm be honest with you. I could honestly say that as of now, I've got a lot of the things that I need. Really, my biggest concern is paying for college. So I guess if it's something that I would need to just, you know, succeed, or to just, you know, to not be in debt, you know, in the next, like, after 4 years, it would just be, you know, just money for college, you know, whether that's your classes or food or just housing, you know, wherever you can go to. That's probably my biggest concern right now.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, one final question for all of our panelists as we wrap up. Are there any last thoughts? You have over 300 people who have registered for this event today and who are attending across all areas of the child and family serving system. Any final thoughts that you want to leave with them?
I think we can just all work together to be part of the solution. Like I said, it can't be the agency on its own. The agency, you know, has to partner in quality ways, and everybody has something to give to contributing to healthy and happy, well communities.
Thank you, Kim.
Absolutely, Kim. And I would say also, be good to yourselves. Give good care to yourselves. And if you're having a bad day, understand that that bad day can also interact with someone else's bad day, and that being a family or a youth or a child that you are trying to serve to be in a better place. So just be very conscientious about giving yourself good care, and not just frontline workers, especially frontline workers, but also, you know, all the way up the chain to Director Leach, all the way up the chain to our governor, all the way up the chain to whomsoever is sitting in the Oval Office. So just continue to be encouraged, give yourself good care so that you can extend that care authentically.
Thank you, Takoria. All right. Well, thank you so much. My sincerest thanks to all of our panelists for spending time with us this morning, for sharing your stories. It's been such a powerful engagement. I know that I've gotten goosebumps throughout this entire thing, and I know that I speak for many of our participants who are listening in. This has been so powerful, and we just thank you for your vulnerability and for your authenticity and for sharing your story with us so that we can work with you and alongside you to improve the system that we all care about. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Amy. Next, we have Karen Jointer Bryant. we're going to be moving into our stakeholder report outs. And so this would also be a time for you, as people go through the report outs, to maybe write down or jot down questions to prepare for our final Q&A. So first, let me just introduce Karen. She is the Deputy State Director for Child Welfare Services. Karen has served the field of social work for over 20 years in many different capacities. She earned a Master's of Science in Social Work with an emphasis on management and community practice from the University of Tennessee. Before being hired as Deputy State Director of Child Welfare Services for the Department of Social Services here in South Carolina, she served as the Executive Director of the Tennessee chapter of Children's Advocacy Centers. And I can tell you, I've had the great joy to partner with and work with Karen over really the last 4 or 5 months, I guess it has been. And I've been very impressed by her leadership. And I'm really excited to hear the vision that she is going to share with us today. Karen?
Thank you so much, Melissa. Good morning again, and thank you all so much for attending our annual stakeholders meeting. I also want to echo Emily's sentiments about our youth panel and our bio and caregiver panelists. Thank you all so very much for authentically showing up and braving the vulnerability space. We hear you, we see you. I have been moved to tears a number of times, but I think I got myself together now and I'm ready to share a bit of what's going on in child welfare services with you all. But I just really wanted to say thank you to our panelists. This is about you. This isn't about us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, my name is Karen Bryant, and I have the pleasure of serving the department as the Deputy State Director of Child Welfare Services. I am sure you all are just as excited as I am to get further into today's agenda, which I am sure will prove to be one of the most productive, collaborative exchanges you've experienced in a while. But before we get into our agenda, I did want to share a bit of background and context for today's agenda. As Melissa shared earlier, she and I started working together about 5 months ago, and this idea was actually born out of discussions between the two of us, where we were initially meeting to explore the possibility of doing like a half-day workshop or something on a specific social work topic, and that conversation turned into doing something more collaboratively. Something really focusing on DSS's burgeoning story and creating a space for our partners to do the same. Because we recognize that all of our stories are interconnected and we are all members of the same body. So we really wanted to use this time to share a bit about our current work and our plans to work collaboratively to build a child and family well-being system, okay? So what are we currently working on within child welfare services? I will say, if I were to share all of the amazing transformational work underway within our division, we would be here all day. So I will share the Cliff Notes version with you, if that's okay. One of the things that we believe about all of the internal processes we are updating and putting in place, we really believe they will lead to long-term systems transformation. We hope that the system will look and perform differently and hopefully better. We also believe that together, and I'm putting emphasis on that, we can develop a child and family well-being system that partners across agencies and with children, youth, and families, because children and families are better together. We are striving to enhance practice and transform the lives of children, youth, and families that we encounter. So when we think about the work that we're undertaking to get us here to this broad, amazing vision, we think about the work within 3 large domains, okay? So the first one is we have those cross-cutting strategies, which are those strategies that are system-wide and are fundamental to ensuring resources, infrastructure, policy, and practices are all aligned. A few examples of our cross-cutting strategies are FFPSA. I know you all have heard about it numerous times. As you know, the Family First Prevention Services Act authorized new optional Title IV-E funding for time-limited prevention services for mental health, substance use, and in-home parent skill-based programs. Another cross-cutting strategy is our efforts to enhance our service array. So this will be a comprehensive set of services that provides ongoing supports and programming from entry to exit. The goal is really to use the most appropriate and least restrictive interventions, both in and out of the home, while also ensuring that safety issues and needs are addressed. It's so important. A third example of our cross-cutting strategy is that of our efforts to improve performance management. And we're wanting to do that through use of data and tools that measure our agency's performance towards achieving key child welfare indicators. Our focus is on specific indicators to continually measure how well our programs and practice are leading to the desired outcomes, okay? So those are just a few of the cross-cutting strategies. That second domain of work that we are currently undertaking is our strategies to preserve families. And these are strategies that represent our efforts to strengthen the front end of child protection, to really ensure children, youth, and families receive supports and services needed to prevent unnecessary systems involvement. A few of those strategies, or specifically the strategies to preserve families, is one, structured decision making. Most of you all are aware that we implemented this in the fall of last year. These are our tools and decision guidelines to provide greater consistency and confidence at intake. Key criteria are considered for every case through highly structured assessment procedures. Another strategy to preserve families is that of our Kinship Navigator program. This program helps to fill a gap by providing our caregivers with information, education, and referrals to a range of services and supports. And a third strategy to preserve families, and we're really excited about all of these strategies to preserve families. This third strategy is the Family Support and Advocacy Assessment Tool. We call that the FAST. That's a tool that is designed to really support its effective interventions when the focus of all of our efforts are on the entire family. The most common use of the FAST is in efforts to address the needs of families who are at risk of child welfare involvement. Okay, and finally, our third domain of strategies are those strategies to achieve permanency. These strategies represent our efforts to partner, and we're intentional with saying partner, with families to ensure all children find safe, permanent homes as quickly as possible. And if a child or youth is unable to be reunified, our priority is always to find homes with relatives or adoptive families. A few of the strategies that are within our efforts to achieve permanency is, again, our kinship continuum. This work is really helping us explore ways to bolster supports for kin, including potential use of waivers, subsidized guardianship, and access to licensing, plus materials to really help kin evaluate what their options and needs are. Another strategy within our efforts to achieve permanence is we have been diligently and tirelessly working towards redesigning our placement process. This approach will enhance and streamline the placement process to really promote and ensure children and youth are matched and placed in the most appropriate settings the first time. The goal is to assure children and youth are in the least restrictive, again, and most family-like setting. Another strategy of ours to achieve permanency is our Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths Assessment. We call that the CANS. Yeah, this is alphabet soup here. This tool is a multi-purpose tool developed for children, for child welfare services to really support decision making, which includes level of care and service planning, but it really helps to also facilitate quality improvement and allows us to actually monitor the outcomes of services and if the child and family are making progress. And last but not least is our extension of foster care. We are working to develop policies and practices to most effectively meet the needs of our young people transitioning from foster care to adult, including expanding services to the age of 21. So as I previously stated, these strategies only scratch the surface of everything we are working on. But as we strive for excellence in all these things and other strategies, we really are hoping to see improvements in 3 key outcome areas. The first one is we want to see more children and youth served in their homes. The second one is when that is not possible, we want to make sure that they are placed with family or in family-like settings. And last but not least, we would really like to see use of our congregate care settings used for treatment rather than long-term placement of our children and youth, okay? So again, like I said, that just scratches the surface of everything that we have going on in the department. But before I wrap up, I would like to restate something that we've heard today and that I shared last year during our winter stakeholders meeting for those of you all that attended. DSS is not the system, and we cannot address child abuse and neglect alone. Responding to and addressing child abuse and neglect is everybody's responsibility, and it really does require a strong public-private partnership. We are here to build relationships because it is the only way to effectively move to a more preventative and robust system that meets the individualized needs of children, youth, and families. I believe to fully actualize a child and family well-being system within South Carolina, which is what we also desperately want and need, we must begin to embrace a new outlook for what our child and family serving system could be. We need your help and partnership because I truly believe the sum of us is greater than the simple tally of individuals that comprise us. I still believe the collective knowledge and expertise in this virtual room and within this state can and will serve the children and families well if we prioritize the people, that's the doers and receivers, the practice and the processes. And if given the time needed to thoughtfully and strategically implement all of the aforementioned strategies, I believe we can truly shift practice and transform this system in ways that are sustainable long beyond our administration. I and my amazing leadership team, which I am sure is joining us today, we remain committed to working alongside each of you to develop a child and family well-being system. Thanks again for joining us and partnering with us in this way. I do hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's an honor for me to be able to introduce Sue Williams. She's led Children's Trust of South Carolina since it was created in 2007. Her passion for children's programs goes back farther, though. In 1993, she founded the group which later became EditVenture Children's Museum in Columbia. Sue is a recipient of the 1999 Order of the Palmetto, which was awarded by Governor Jim Hodges for her work with EditVenture. Because of her advocacy in South Carolina and across the country on behalf of children, Sue was a national honoree of the 2019 Children's Bureau Champion Award in the inaugural year for the Promoting Child and Family Wellbeing category. Currently, Sue sits on the board of directors for South Carolina First Steps to School Readiness and the South Carolina Office of Rural Health and EditVenture. She is a member of the South Carolina Child Fatality Advisory Committee and the leadership team for the Alliance for a Healthier South Carolina. On a national level, Sue is a peer reviewer for Prevent Child Abuse America, and she recently concluded a multi-year term on the board of directors for the National Alliance for Children's Trust and Prevention Funds. Sue completed Harvard University's Governing for Nonprofit Excellence program, Leadership South Carolina, and Furman University's Diversity Leadership Institute. She holds a bachelor's degree in science from Northern Illinois University and a master's in business administration from the University of South Carolina. Welcome, Sue.
Please unmute your mic.
Sorry, thank you, Melissa, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to take you on a quick whirlwind tour of Children's Trust and all that we are doing. We are a statewide organization that was created in 1984 by the General Assembly. So when our bio says that we were created in 2007, that was actually the result of a merger for Prevent Child Abuse South Carolina, the Children's Trust Fund, and Voices for South Carolina's Children, coming together under one roof to provide a single voice for the prevention of child abuse and neglect across the state. Next. Our mission at Children's Trust is to strengthen families, organizations, and communities to prevent child abuse and neglect. And our vision is that we will have a South Carolina where every child thrives. So much like we were talking before about the system, if you think of the system as a house, we try to keep people from going into the house. We are out in the front yard, out in the street, trying to keep people from going into the house. And we say, how do we do that? We use our guiding values in leadership, and we believe that everyone is a leader, and everyone on this call is a leader. Everyone in their community has a place to be a leader for children. We believe in trust and transparency and accountability for all that we do. We believe in an equitable voice at the table, and we are constantly seeking new and innovative ways to serve children and families across the state. Next. So how do we do that? We are an intermediate organization, meaning that we get money in on behalf of the state and we give it out to other organizations who are delivering these programs. Our role as an intermediary, though, is to help them succeed, and we do a lot of coaching, much like a coach does. They don't play the game, but they coach the players to be their best selves on the courts or the ball fields. Next. So we do it in 4 main areas. We lead prevention training, we do supporting programs, we provide the resources such as the funding and the training and technical assistance, but we also build coalitions. One of the things that we believe is that children are going to be good and healthy when they live in families that are good and healthy, and families will do well when they live in communities that support them. So we do a lot of work in the communities. Next. So we have proven prevention programs in home visiting, strengthening families, which is a curriculum, a 14-week curriculum, and Triple P positive parenting. I'll share that as we go forward, but I just wanted you to see our footprint. We are in every county in some way except for the 4 gray ones, and we're working on those. Next. The first one is the Maternal Infant Early Childhood Home Visiting Program. That is a federally funded program, formula funded to each state, and we are the recipient of it and grant money out across the state to serve over 2,500 moms annually in 3 different home visiting programs. Next. If you are interested in a home visiting program in your county for someone you know, you can go to the county at schomevisiting.org and find not only the programs that we fund, but other ones around the state. There are a lot of home visiting programs, and they are a great primary prevention program dealing with moms prenatally through the age 5, depending on the child's birthday. I mean, depending on the model that is used. Next. I'm trying to hurry up and go fast, sorry, because I know we're on time. So the Strengthening Families program is one of our flagship programs. It is a 14-week curriculum. We do this in partnership with our funder, the Duke Endowment, and Department of Social Services. Families are enrolled. It is free to them, and they come for 14 weeks. It is a 2-generation approach, both the parents and the children learning something together. And then graduations are always a really happy event. We hear things that many of us on the call probably would assume everyone has, but things like a family meal, having family time together, playtime together. They learn these skills. This is not something that they know how to do. And I think Corey had really talked about that. When you've grown up in a different kind of home, you want something really good for your family, and coming to a Strengthening Families program really helps them learn these skills. Next. I mentioned the 2-generation approach. Next. So we are in, I don't know how this one, 3 counties, that's not correct. So we are in 31 counties. I think there's a mix up in the slide. Yeah. And we have 24 partners who are delivering the program. As I mentioned, it's usually a 14-week program, but since the pandemic, we have been serving families virtually, and some have shifted to a 7-week, meeting twice a week, and they've really enjoyed that because they've been homebound and have found really good things to do with their families while they're home. So next. If you have a family that you would like to refer to the Strengthening Families program, you can go to this link, and maybe somebody can put that in the chat, and fill out the form, and somebody will get to you about having a family enrolled in whatever county they're close to. The interesting thing is now that we're virtual, we've had some programs that are filled up, but we can now serve them virtually in another county and they're not having to drive. So that's actually been a positive effort through this pandemic. Next. The Positive Parenting Program is our newest effort. It is a 5-level county-wide coordinated system of prevention, everything from seminars and posters, positive messaging. We are in 3 specific counties. Next. So Greenville County, and Greenville County First Steps is our backbone organization. Spartanburg County Hope Center for Children is the backbone there, and Georgetown County is Tidelands Health. And you can contact any one of those to see where you might plug in for a training on Triple P, or how you can get, they have home visits. It's a multi-tiered system, but it's evidence-based, and we're showing really promising results. Next. So besides those things, we also do a bunch of other things. We lead the Adverse Childhood Experiences Initiative for the state. We have over 100 trainers across the state that we've trained. So if you would like an ACE training in and around your community, you can contact us and we can make that happen, and that is free to you. There may be travel involved. Right now it's virtual, but post-pandemic, sometimes we have to have some travel expenses paid for, but otherwise it's free. The Empower Action Model is our newest pilot, where we actually go into communities and share data and information with them and walk them through a process of how they can improve the lives for the children and families in their community, what they want, not what we say they want, but what they want. Kids Count, we are the designated Kids Count organization from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and we do a release in June with the National Foundation, and then we also do other releases throughout the year. We just did one on the effects of COVID on children, so you might check that out on our website. And then, of course, Child Abuse Prevention Month is April. We are the Pinwheel people. We love to share pinwheels. We say pinwheels don't stop child abuse and neglect, but they do start a conversation of how people can get involved. Next. So these are our Empower Action communities. I mentioned that we are in Resilient Richland, Empower Action Marlboro, and Empower Action Coney, working with those 3 communities specifically. And they have just developed their plan to go forward and start working on making those 3 counties a great place for the children and families that live there. Next. Prevention training, we have a conference every 18 months. We will be having a virtual conference this March. It was supposed to be in Myrtle Beach, and hopefully when the post-pandemic we'll be back there, but you can go to our website just after the first of the year and the registration will be open, and we have some amazing speakers that I know you'll want to take part in. Next. And of course, Child Abuse Prevention Month. You can go online and get pinwheels. We love to share pinwheels with churches, school groups, Rotaries, whoever is willing to plant a pinwheel garden. Next. And so where do we go from here? And I'm just going to touch on a few key things because some have already been covered. Next. The continuum of family strengthening programs. Next. As we talked about, we believe that family strengthening is on a continuum from, as I mentioned, the front yard of the house all the way through to the back door of the house. And we want to make sure that we are all connected. So one of the ways to do that is with family resource centers. We have a few in our state. They don't call themselves that, but they are providing community-based, flexible, family-focused services. And so our next effort is really going to be elevating their efforts and linking them up and hopefully enhancing the work that they do in their communities and potentially opening more. We've got a lot of philanthropic partners at the table who are anxious for this to move forward. Next. Thriving Families, Safer Children. Emily did a great job on this one, so I won't go on with this one. Next. Just that we love partnering with DSS. And so thank you. I hope I was in my time limit. I am just so excited not only to be here today, but to share with you about our prevention services and thinking that we can help families before bad things happen.
Thank you so much, Sue. We really appreciate it. Dr. Moss, it's an honor to introduce you. You're currently the Center Director for the Center for Child and Family Studies at the College of Social Work at the University of South Carolina. Carl brings with us over 25 years of experience working with public for profit and nonprofit organizations in the United States, Costa Rica, Equatorial Guinea, South Korea, and elsewhere. His substantive focus has been primarily on child welfare research, specifically understanding how to prevent family violence. Carl has been involved in longitudinal research, looking at intergenerational cycles of family violence, helped create access platforms to provide social services to non-English speaking communities, develop data collection systems and manage data sets to capture program and organizational performance, and develop strategic funding portfolios to support long-term sustainable health and educational programming. Carl has a PhD in social welfare from the University of Washington through an NIMH Prevention Science Fellowship, and he was a Return Peace Corps Fellow while obtaining a dual MSW MPH degree from the University of South Carolina. And I do have to tell on him and that he actually was a faculty member at the College of Social Work, and then he went away doing corporate responsibility in other countries, and he just returned this March of 2020. So we are very happy to have him with us to give you an update about the Center and the College of Social Work. Carl?
Thank you so much for that really nice introduction. I also wanted to just say I really appreciate Director Leach, Dean Pitner, and Emily Parks for hosting this, as well as Melissa Wright-Meyer and Karen Bryant for pulling this together. It's an honor to be sitting on the same panel with Lyman, Sue Williams, Dr. Ken Rogers, Josh Baker, as well as our folks from the panel, Kim, Takora, Maj, and Malaysia. So what I want to touch base on, the Center for Child and Family Studies, what we do is basically focus on developing human capacity in social service organizations. We do this with a variety of different organizations, primarily Department of Social Services, but also we work with Department of Health and Human Services, South Carolina Voc Rehab Department, and we also work with, on national level, CASA, LIDEM, and GAL, to enhance the service delivery that these organizations bring to the table, primarily through training and research. Next. The takeaways from my very short talk will be about the guiding principles and standards, or GPS aligned child welfare basic training certification that we've been working on with DSS. Some really interesting research around social determinants of foster care. This is done in partnership with DSS, Duke Endowment, the College of Social Work, and the Center. And then I want to leave a parting idea and plant a seed, if you will, about how to develop critical thinking training platforms once Thriving Families kind of takes off and all the foundational pieces are put together. Next. So, the GPS aligned child welfare basic training certification. This is a project we've been working on with DSS before Thriving Families kicked off. And it really speaks to the leadership of Director Leach and Karen Bryant on looking at child welfare and understanding that the principles, the guiding principles of the GPS model, being family-centered, trauma-informed, service delivery that really focuses on individual and strength-based opportunities, and to be culturally responsive in that delivery. And so these guiding principles are baked into this basic training certification overhaul, and we're really excited about this work that will launch in January of 2021. The other piece that's really important is the process piece. The training is moving kind of back in-house to the Division of Staff Development and Training. And this is really important because what it shows is DSS is really taking in ownership of this basic training and making sure that it breaks the triangles that might have existed in the past, where the training was seen as something that was coming from the outside, and now it's really the training that DSS owns, and this will affect how the training, I think, will be embraced over time. The other piece that's really important is we've developed through guidance with other consultants that DSS has brought on board an individualized programming that focuses on and creates opportunities for in-person, online, and workplace learning concepts. And this is important because it capitalizes on experiential learning opportunities, and it's really important for adult learning styles. And I think what you'll see in the future is a staff that has a really fundamental, basic capacity to do the work. And this is important because that becomes a springboard for professional learning and development pathways as caseworkers eventually become supervisors or go into different areas, specific areas of child welfare and service delivery. Next. Another piece that we're really excited about is a project that is funded by Duke Endowment. It brings together researchers from the Center of Child and Family Studies, as well as Kristen Say from the College of Social Work, and Diana Tester from the Department of Social Services. And what the focus or the aim of this particular research is really exciting, because what it's taking is a public health concept, social determinants, and it's applying that research to looking at how social determinants correlate with the entry into and then the exit out of foster care. And I think that Kim, Takora, Maj, and Malaysia, they really did a good job of talking about some of the externals that happen before folks get into the DSS system. And mental health was, I think, a standout commonality that occurred in all the stories. And the other thing that comes out of that then is some of the social determinants around that. So stigma around being able to hold a job, poverty that ensues because education and other work opportunities are limited, being in situations, home situations where there are power and control differentials and being leveraged in a relationship that might not be healthy in order to survive. And then while looking for assistance, not being able to get some of those assistances because of other social determinants around, the individual cases. And so we're really excited about this research. We think it's going to have an important potential to inform Thriving Families planning for South Carolina, as well as the other states that in the county, Los Angeles County, that are involved in this particular work. And so we look forward to being part of that in the near future. And now lastly, an area that we think is really important, something to maybe plant a seed in regarding Thriving Families. Thriving Families is a wonderful opportunity because it breaks the box a little bit. It allows folks to think outside the box. It also looks to bring together the critical pieces, the building blocks, if you will, the foundation for improving child welfare services that is not just centered around DSS per se, but also the larger community. An important thing that we think should be thought about and we hope to be a part of in the future is thinking about how once we get all these foundational pieces together, really working with agencies and other service providers to develop critical thinking skills trainings that are really important to real world performance, and likewise underpin operational success, because as workers or staff, case managers, supervisors, as they're working, their critical thinking skills make them more successful. Obviously, then the outcomes of the work that they're doing enhances the operational success. And one way to do this is through simulation training platforms. And this is a continuum of different types of trainings, from the classic Harvard business case model is one, to a lot of next step technology platforms that are emerging quite quickly in the last couple of years, and actually have benefited from the COVID environment because it's forced folks to think a little bit outside the box in that way, and particularly augmented and virtual reality training platforms. We're currently working, for instance, with the South Carolina Vocational Rehab Department, along with the UofSC School of Medicine, on developing virtual reality trainings for youth that are entering into the workforce. And these are youth who have challenges, developmental, cognitive challenges, or physical challenges that make going into the workforce a lot more difficult. And these are virtual reality platforms that allow them to test out the knowledge that they've gained through trainings and interventions and apply them. But what's really interesting is then you can put in differentials. And these differentials are really nice because what they do is they allow for kind of real-time consequences of decisions being made and how they get played out in the simulations. And this allows youth to have the opportunity, or in this case, the trainees have opportunity to learn right on time, what were the consequences of decisions being made, and then thinking through those critical thinking pathways and enhance what they're doing. So this is something that we think is a really exciting opportunity. We hope that in the future, as Thriving Family initiatives create their structure and have all their building blocks in place, they really think about how to anchor all that with critical training platforms, and in particular, utilizing some of the new technologies that have come out in recent years. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity. That's it for me, and looking forward to questions and answers later on in the session.
Thanks so much, Dr. Moss. All right, we are ready to move on to Dr. Kenneth Rogers. Kenneth Rogers, newly hired in April of 2020, serves as the State Director for the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. Dr. Rogers was selected by the South Carolina Mental Health Commission and took the helm of the department on April 2nd. Think about that for a minute. Everybody was being shepherded in right at the start of the COVID pandemic and the social unrest that was happening around the nation. Dr. Rogers received his MD from the University of South Carolina School of Medicine. He completed both his general psychiatry residency and a child psychiatry fellowship at the William S. Hall Psychiatric Institute at University of South Carolina, right here in Columbia. Dr. Rogers is a board certified in both general psychiatry and child psychiatry. He has also completed a Master of Science in Public Health from the University of California in Los Angeles and a Master's of Medical Management from the University of Southern California. Welcome, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. It's exciting to talk about mental health. I think one of the themes that I've heard from today really has been the interface between mental health issues and social services, especially as I was listening to your panel earlier. I think that theme came through loud and clear. The Department of Mental Health will be 200 years old next year, and we'll be celebrating our bicentennial, and we're certainly looking forward to that. For much of that time, we've actually been serving families. And so we see ourselves as the second oldest mental health system in the country. And really during that entire time, one is focused on how can we do better with working with families and kids. With the theme that we had today, as we talked about mental health issues, there were a couple things that popped through for me. The first thing was, as we think about the changes that are occurring in schools, the things that are changing in societies, there are many families and children that aren't able to access services simply because things are changing so quickly, and the lack of access for services. Within the Department of Mental Health, we're in all 46 counties of the state, providing both adult, family, and child services. We provide many of those services through schools. We're in about 70% of schools, actually a little over 70% of schools throughout the state, providing services both on site and virtually, depending on where the schools are at this point in time. We've done telemedicine services, telepsych services for over 20 years now, first getting a Duke Endowment grant that allowed us to expand into telemedicine. And so as the pandemic hit, we've been able to just continue what we've been doing and really be able to fan out and providing even more services. And we're really committed to working with all of our child serving agencies around the state to be able to provide additional services. Next slide. Here is the number of services that we provided at the Department of Mental Health over the past year. As you can see the numbers here, we have provided, in terms of individual therapy, almost 24,000 individual therapy cases within the department, as well as family therapy, about 15,000. We have about almost 11,000 kids that have been assessed by our physicians to think about medication management, which has been a big issue around the country. One of the things that we're committed to is really thinking about our prescribing patterns to make sure that kids aren't over medicated. One of the things that we've seen around the country is a real focus on making sure that populations in social welfare systems aren't over medicated, because we know that in the past that's been a huge issue for us. And so we've tried to make sure that every kid is assessed by a child psychiatrist to determine the need for medications or not. And we've had almost 11,000 of those visits. So I think that overall we're doing a great job moving forward. Next slide. One of the things that we have focused on is trying to make sure that every center within our state has the ability to address services for both older kids, families, as well as younger kids. And so we continue to fan out across the state. We continue to provide ongoing training for our staff as we work with younger kids. As I talked about earlier, telehealth has been a big move for us. In addition to providing services within the center using telehealth, we have also been able to provide services to home. That's been a big move because it's allowed us to see both kids and families in their home environment and to be able to do things locally versus having to have folks come into the center, where in many cases having really the ability to get into the center because of transportation issues becoming a huge issue. The other thing we've done is to work on our trauma-informed care, as well as making sure that we've had trauma-focused CBT services available throughout our community and our services. Next slide. We've continued to work with DSS, especially through the Infant Mental Health Association. Again, trying to make sure that we're doing early childhood education in many of the early childhood centers throughout the state. That's been an area of focus for us because we do believe that the earlier that we're able to intervene, the better our outcomes are in the long term. The other thing that we have tried to do is the use of multidimensional family therapy. Again, to make sure that we are strengthening families, to make sure that we are getting kids what they need early on, because we know that by working with families, we're going to be able to make a huge difference in the life of children. Next slide. In working with the Infant Mental Health Association, again, we're trying to improve social skills. We're working on externalizing behaviors. One of the huge things about externalizing behaviors in children is it often leads to really negative outcomes. It's one of the biggest risk factors for going in the juvenile justice system as well as the adult correction system. And so the earlier we can intervene to make sure that we're intervening, kids are going to do better in school, they're going to be less likely to go into some of the deep end systems, and families are going to do better. Part of the way that we do that is by decreasing suspensions and expulsions, but also improving the relationships between the children and their caregivers as well. Again, we're utilizing telehealth, not just for psychiatry interventions as we have in the past, but also doing more therapy-based interventions, especially with trauma-focused CBT as we've moved forward. Next slide. We've worked with Safe Baby, again, thinking about early intervention. 3 programs that we've focused on, primarily in Spartanburg, Richland, and Lawrence counties, and hoping that we'll be able to fan out further throughout the state. We've also worked quite extensively on looking at those collaborations, again, so that we could train more people, increase competency really across all agencies as it relates to mental health. Because again, as I talked about earlier, one of the constant themes that we see, especially in social welfare agencies, are mental health issues. And so the more that we can really focus on trying to get everyone able to engage, especially on the front end related to triage and referral for mental health services, the better off we'll be in the long term. Next slide. And then finally, I talked a little bit about multidimensional family therapy. One of the things that we're trying to do is to look at evidence-based care and how can we use more evidence-based care across everything that we do with children and families. As you can see that we're up to now 45 clinicians that are certified in MDFT, several more that are in the training pipeline. Again, the same thing with our Safe Baby network. And so as we begin to move forward, especially with expanding our kids services, expanding our partnerships, we're hoping to use more evidence-based services moving forward. So that really concludes my quick overview of the Department of Mental Health. Thank you for having us.
Melissa, you're muted.
Thank you so much. I just realized that. Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers. Next up, we actually have Dr. Josh Baker, who is here with the Department of Health and Human Services. And let's learn a little bit about Josh. He is the State Director for the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, having most recently served as the agency's Director of Operations. He was appointed by Governor Henry D. McMaster on November 9th, 2017. Prior to joining the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, he served as Governor Nikki Haley's Deputy Chief of Staff for Budget and Policy and was the primary author of the FY 2015-16 and 16-17 executive budgets. Director Baker holds an International Master of Business Administration from the University of South Carolina and undergraduate degrees in Business Economics from the University of South Carolina and Clinical Laboratory Science from the George Washington University. Welcome, Director Baker.
Your mic is muted.
Josh, you'll want to unmute.
There we go. How's that?
That's amazing.
Sorry about that. The button wouldn't click, but all right. So thank you for having me today. I think what we're going to follow on Dr. Rogers' discussion real quickly with some updates related to some projects the agency is working on. Just for context, real quickly though, you know, for a forum that is really about state agency work with children, what we wanted to point out pretty quickly is that with, you know, right around 1.1 million children in the state, you know, the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services is the single state agency for the Medicaid program, covers in a typical period about 650,000 of those children for their primary insurance. And due to some congressional actions early on in the pandemic, we cover about 690,000 today. So, you know, first, I want to make sure that the slides are up. So if I say next slide, we're good to go. Okay, so we can go to the second slide to talk a little bit about our agenda today. We're going to touch on the Palmetto Coordinated System of Care waiver that is approved and operational now, some institutional phases of our pricing project, telehealth, and some other payment initiatives that are underway, really to touch on this continuum of care and individual incremental decisions that are being made to shore up that continuum of care that in and of itself, you may not point to that, but when combined are greater than the sum of their parts. We'll talk a little bit about some of the effect congressional action in response to the coronavirus pandemic has had on the way we do eligibility. And then finally, the community engagement initiative that is getting spun up. So on slide 3, just very quickly, we will discuss the Palmetto Coordinated System of Care. So, you know, I'm the 4th director to have had this draft waiver dropped in my inbox when I took over, and we have finally submitted and received approval for, and then at Continuum of Care put into operation a somewhat pared down version of the PCSC waiver to provide children with higher than usual, really intense behavioral health and social needs, with wraparound case management and some additional services to help them be successful in the community. This approach is sort of the bedrock of institutional de-escalation and providing supports in the community. Now it's small. We have 240 slots for the waiver, and they'll grow by 50 per year over the next 4 years. But you know, there are plenty available right now. I think maybe only about half the slots are filled. And so I would encourage folks in the foster care system and in the family preservation system to get in touch with the Continuum of Care over at the Department of Child Advocacy and take advantage of this program to get those intensive community services for children. You know, when we go to slide 4, when I was actually first hired into this job and in my confirmation hearing, I committed to doing a comprehensive review of all of the rates for all providers that serve the Medicaid system. And we've done professional, some miscellaneous, some pharmacy updates. We've moved into the phase of the pricing project that's going to focus on institutional reimbursement, and that's going to cover everything from hospitals to ambulatory surgical centers to inpatient psych. The reason that I would pay attention to this from the point of a child serving agency is that we're including inpatient psych not just for adults, but for children as well, so PRTFs. Now, we realize, and had a conversation earlier this week with Director Rogers, Director Leach, Director Whittle, and Director Pugh, that you know, while we need to have disciplined step-down processes in place for children that are in institutional settings, we have some odd incentives in institutional reimbursement itself, some disincentives to take children with particular needs, and some incentives to engage in maybe overly stringent utilization management on the other side. And so what we want to do is focus our rate structures such that the market in South Carolina, the market of private inpatient psychiatric services, are willing to take the children that are really become the direct responsibility of the state, mostly through Directors Pugh and Director Leach, and provide those services as a safety net. And so we've engaged those systems and those agencies to create those financial incentives, because when it comes to children's services, often as goes Medicaid, so does the market. On slide 5, we are just sort of touching on a couple other payment items that we're working through to improve access to services and focus on very often high intensity, short duration mental health and behavioral health services for children. The first is working through the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs. We're unwinding the subcapitated band system that the state has had for over 20 years, and are coming into compliance with some requirements that our federal payers put into effect about 6 years ago. We simplified billing for therapeutic and treatment foster care so that parents who are those primary providers would not have to engage in quite the level of documentation and clinical notation necessary to bill Medicaid for those services. And really, these last 2 sets of bullets on behavioral health redesign and safety net provider status is something the department has been committed to doing for some time, and that is a comprehensive system-wide review of the financial incentives we've put in place to providers to serve certain populations or adopt certain modalities of therapies, incentives or disincentives to do those versus what the objectives of our direct child serving agencies would like to see happen in the marketplace. As a reminder, as much coverage as we grant to children and as much money we spend on children's services, my department does not provide any directly. So we very much have a supporting role in working with the directors that have been in the forum today to produce the financial might necessary such that they can elicit from a provider community the outcomes that they need. On slide 6, finally, Dr. Rogers touched on this, which is telehealth, and I get probably one question a week about the flexibilities that were put in place to respond to the pandemic and when we may or may not make modifications. I think the first thing we would say that although we've broadly used authorities that are separate and apart from federal declarations or state declarations of public health emergencies, we will likely tie our actions to what the community response is to the pandemic. So that's number one. Number two is everybody who's concerned that we're going to make major changes to modifications, stand up, take a deep breath, exhale. We will give tons of notice when we intend to change any of our reimbursement policies. So there will be no shocks or knee-jerk reactions. We will communicate constantly and consistently with the provider community. And if you are not on our email distribution list, I recommend you go to our website and get on it now, because we produce, if not somewhat dry, nonetheless informative bulletins on a regular basis about what's going on here at the department. Finally, to talk about Medicaid eligibility, which if I get a question about telehealth every week, I get 2 questions about eligibility, and that is, Congress has not mandated through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, we were not mandated to not disenroll individuals or not to change our eligibility, but there is a strong financial incentive for states not to do so. So we get a 6.2 percentage increase in our federal match rate every quarter that we elect to keep folks enrolled and not engage in any disenrollments, which for South Carolina, is a 9-figure sum. So I can't imagine anytime soon that we would reinstate eligibility redeterminations. And we've been in constant communication with CMS not to create a cliff once redeterminations start again, but instead to measure those out over time. So individuals, families, the provider community, and our partner managed care organizations, and frankly, the agency itself can re-engage the eligibility apparatus over time. And then finally, another initiative that has been on pause for several months due to the provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA, is the Community Engagement Initiative. This waiver has 2 parts. One is very much focused on parents of children in the Medicaid program. One, putting standards in place so individuals who are able to seek worker employment to do so as a condition of receiving Medicaid eligibility for the parent, not for the child. The standard does not extend to the children, but there is also some tailored coverage additions in the waiver that goes along with this. One that closes the gap for certain uninsured parents between 67 and 100% of the federal poverty limit before folks who can get subsidized health insurance plans on the federal exchange operating here in South Carolina. The second is we've set aside a number of slots for parents of children who are in foster care. These are not foster parents, but parents of the children, biological parents of the children who are in foster care, who have to complete substance use or behavioral health programs as part of a family preservation or reunification approach. This is important because very often these parents are eligible for Medicaid coverage as the result of their children's Medicaid coverage, and when they lose, even temporarily, their custodial relationship with the child, they would otherwise lose Medicaid coverage. This is intended and wouldn't have a payer for the very treatments that they need to engage in order to facilitate, in part, family reunification. We're trying to create or remove, rather, that disincentive to engaging in a full course of substance use and behavioral health treatment. And the waiver allows us to provide state and federal dollars for those services. So I haven't been watching the clock, to be frank. So Melissa, I apologize, but I imagine I'm relatively close to time. But that's all I have, and I look forward to the Q&A session. So thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you so much, Director Baker. We're about 10 minutes behind, so you did a perfect job of covering everything in 10 minutes.
Excellent.
Next, we have Amanda Whittle. She's the State Director for South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. She was appointed as South Carolina State Child Advocate and Director of the South Carolina Department of Children's Advocacy by Governor Henry D. McMaster on June 3rd of 2019. Director Whittle has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of South Carolina at Aiken and a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of South Carolina School of Law. She is admitted to the South Carolina Bar and United States District Court. She is certified as a Child Welfare Law Specialist through the National Association of Counsel for Children. She currently serves on the Suicide Prevention Coalition and Child Fatality Advisory Committee, Children's Justice Act Task Force, Medical Care Advisory Board, Children's Law Committee of the South Carolina Bar, South Carolina Behavioral Health Coalition, Bench Bar Committee, Joint Council of Children and Adolescents, DSS Advisory Council, involved with juvenile justice system. And she is married to her former law partner, James Whittle. I also wanted to point out that she also was general counsel with the Department of Social Services for 4 years, during which time she served as the interim internal monitor for the Michelle H. versus SCDSS lawsuit, class action lawsuit. And we are very thrilled to have her here to talk to us more about what the department is doing at the Children's Advocacy, Department of Children's Advocacy. You're welcome. Amanda?
And so hopefully the PowerPoint is available.
It is.
Melissa, you'll have to share your screen. We've lost that.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that welcome. My name is Amanda Whittle. I was an assistant general counsel at the Department of Social Services and enjoyed my time there. And I'm now the state child advocate and director of the Department of Children's Advocacy. Once the slide gets up, we'll be to slide 2. And I will highlight the work that we do here at the Department of Children's Advocacy with children and families, which will take us to slide number 3. So the Department of Children's Advocacy was created with an effective date of July 1, 2019, and we administer 3 divisions which began in the 1980s and were formerly part of the Department of Administration and were part of the governor's office before that. And Continuum of Care is one of these 3 divisions. Next. The Continuum of Care serves children with serious emotional and behavioral health diagnoses whose families need help keeping them in their home, school, or community. The Continuum helps children and families using the high-fidelity wraparound model. Next. The 10 principles of high-fidelity wraparound underscore a vision that I have heard other presenters share today, and I love that. Individualized, strengths-based, natural supports, collaboration, unconditional care, this idea of being worthy, community-based, culturally competent, team-based, and outcome-based. And I want you to see there in the center that family, voice, and choice are at the center of the team that operates with Continuum of Care. Next. Anyone can make a referral. The referral application must include documentation of severe emotional or behavioral health diagnoses. Next. There is an initial screening assessment with general criteria about the youth and family, and that must include a determination and actual we go through a process to make certain that we're not duplicating services and that we're not performing services that other agencies are better equipped to do. So the youth must have treatment needs which are not being met by the existing service delivery systems and which require a comprehensive and organized system of care approach. Next. And then there is an eligibility assessment. Continuum uses 2 assessment tools, the Child and Family Adolescent Functional Assessment Score, the CAFAS, assesses the degree of function impairment, and then the CASI, as Director Baker alluded to, the PCSC waiver and the 1915 C Medicaid waiver, which names Continuum of Care as the provider for intensive care coordination in August of 2020, when that was implemented, we began using CASI. It evaluates the service needs for the youth. Next. So youth are assessed at the beginning of the program and then reassessed during the course of the program. And I love to share this information. This is what it's all about, these measurable outcomes. So this chart shows the reduction in CAFA scores among children who were served in the state's 4 continuum of care regions during 2019. You'll see there in that baseline score that these young people came to us with baseline scores of 140 or 160. And then as of January 14, 2020, their most recent CAFA scores had reduced by as much as 70 in some regions. So the 30-point difference in a CAFA score is directly related to the ability of those adolescents to be able to function in daily life activities. So y'all, some of these children, when they come to Continuum, they are absolutely not able to really function in their home and school environment. They've really exhausted the services from other agencies, and they really need help. And so it's very exciting to be able to work with these children. I'm so excited to be part of a program that administers continuum of care. And again, as Director Baker alluded, we have capacity right now for 240. We're not there. So please think about us. And let's go to that next slide. By providing evidence-based intensive care coordination, youth are less likely to be placed into a juvenile justice, foster care, or institutional placement setting. And I do want to say that, you know, some of these young people still have to go to a PRTF. They still have to be removed from their home. But we have some proven efficacy there with the work that we do, and I'm proud of that work. Next slide. So Foster Care Review Board is another division within the Department of Children's Advocacy, and the South Carolina Heart Gallery is part of that division. Next. The Foster Care Review Board reviews cases of children who are in foster care, and they issue reports to the family court judges regarding recommendations for specific children. In addition to that, the Foster Care Review Board publishes an annual report, and they make that available to the public at fcrb.sc.gov. Each year, it's there now, and it has data and recommendations. Some of the data that's included with that are the information about the South Carolina Heart Gallery. I wanted to include that here just to let you know that in fiscal years 19 and 20, a total of 228 children were photographed at photo shoots arranged by the Heart Gallery. That is a wonderful time. It used to be back in another time we would all get together in person and we would have these, but Foster Care Review Board and Heart Gallery got creative this year and did some porch photo shoots. And then the Heart Gallery takes these photographs, and in conjunction with the Department of Corrections, they create beautiful framed photographs. They crop the photos and they make them very beautiful, and set up 346 photo exhibits over the past 2 years. All of that is in an effort to be able to highlight these young people who are legally free and in foster care and waiting on forever homes. So 5,675 inquiries were received as a result of this work over the past 2 years. 163 children were matched. And as many of you know, we had our highest year for completed adoptions during 2019. And so we're proud of that work as well. Next. The Cass Elias McCarter Guardian Ad Litem program is the third division of the Department of Children's Advocacy. Next. The Cass Elias McCarter Guardian Ad Litem program began in the 1980s, and at that time, volunteers were appointed as guardians ad litem for abused or neglected children within the DSS family court system. But that changed, and beginning July 1, 2010, all children who were involved in DSS family court cases are appointed a guardian ad litem through the Cass Elias McCarter Guardian Ad Litem program, except Richland County, which has a county-based program. So, next slide. So 9,144 children were served by the Cass Elias McCarter Guardian Ad Litem program between July 1, 2019 and June 30, 2020. And the Guardian Ad Litem program has about 100 staff members and almost 2,000 volunteers who do this work. Next slide. So if you've ever been in a DSS family court hearing, you may wonder, why are there so many people involved, and why does a child need a guardian ad litem, and is it a good idea for the guardian ad litem to be a volunteer at all? So the Cass Elias McCarter Guardian Ad Litem program is based on the National CASA Guardian Ad Litem model, and that is a volunteer model. Studies have shown that children who've experienced abuse or neglect fare better with a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate, or a GAL, a guardian ad litem volunteer by their side. They're more likely to find a safe and permanent home. They're more likely to succeed in school. They are less likely to re-enter the foster care system. Raise your hand if you hope that Tacoria Jones's 6th grade teacher is still involved with children. Goodness knows, we want to recruit people like her who care about children to be guardians ad litem and to volunteer to work with children. Next slide. I heard something during a Safe Baby Court presentation that I want to share with you. Courts are multi-generational trauma centers. National CASA has published data and information on their website about how community advocates strengthen the child well-being system. Next. Guardians ad litem are trained to understand the impact of trauma on children. And a word we all love, resiliency. Having a stable relationship with a supportive adult can help children do well, even when they have faced significant hardships. Next. So the investigations unit was formed as a result of the legislation that created the Department of Children's Advocacy effective July 1, 2019. Next. From July 1, 2019 to June 30, 2020, 4,707 calls were made to the investigations unit. We have 2 dedicated investigators, and we have the department, the Deputy Child Advocate of Investigation who supervises that unit. Many callers want to lodge a complaint against the 9 agencies that are in the statute, and they want to lodge a complaint against one of those agencies about the services that are being provided or not provided to children. But many of those callers also want services. They want resources. They want referrals. So we have worked very hard over the past year to engage with other agencies regarding improving services, to build a network of relationships and contacts with those agencies, to provide information to callers about our state service array. And another thing that I've heard folks talk about today, just to reduce the stigma that goes along sometimes, unfortunately, with just asking for help. Next slide. So looking ahead. Ongoing and future collaboration. Next. As the state child advocate, I'm charged with developing and promoting a broad vision for reform, and this is it. Joint trainings and meetings to promote access and awareness of an array of services that allow children to safely remain in their homes and communities, or in the least restrictive, most family-like setting based upon their needs. Coordination of services and efforts for a system of care grounded in urgency, empathy, and sustainability, and continued collaboration with child welfare partners regarding communication, service coordination, and planning strategies to improve the timeliness of court hearings and outcomes for children. Next slide. So how does that broad vision of reform intersect with South Carolina's system of care? We must share and collaborate, then design and implement this vision. During the long period of time that it will take to fully transform, we have been and will continue to engage in case-specific inquiry and advocacy with specific agencies, but I've included here some of the work that we're doing with other agencies. This is not an exhaustive list, but particularly because DSS is hosting this symposium, I wanted to be able to highlight some of the work that's going on there, and that's safe baby courts, pre-merits hearing conferences, meetings with multi-agency leadership that other folks have alluded to during today's call, regularly scheduled input and feedback. Joint trainings have been scheduled for the spring. And again, this case-specific inquiry and advocacy with agencies that as callers contact us and there are specific needs that occur, we're reaching out to those folks and we're trying to find out if this is a one-off or if it's systemic and what we can do to help those families. Next. So the Department of Children's Advocacy's mission is to grow a community where children thrive. This is our community. These are our children. The Continuum of Care Director is Greg Wright. The Foster Care Review Board Director is Lisa Armstrong. The Guardian Ad Litem Program Director is Ladera Josie. The investigations unit's overseen by our Deputy Child Advocate of Investigations, Kayla Capps, and our Deputy Child Advocate of Operations is Petra Clay Jones. Next. We recognize the need to communicate like we are today, to communicate needs, to communicate resources, to communicate questions and progress. We began a newsletter and social media accounts the week after the state of emergency was declared, and we've maintained these accounts in the newsletter in an effort to maintain communication and connectedness. We need to all be engaged in sharing what we're doing and why we're doing it. Why do we need transformation, and what is that going to look like as we move forward? Next. So what will we achieve through collaboration, communication, and connectedness? How will transformation of our child and family well-being system actually improve outcomes for children and families? Next. By promoting protective factors which support community, school, and family connections, we will increase resiliency among youth and families. We will strengthen parent and child relationships. We will improve stability and well-being for children. We will build stronger families and communities. We need to listen to each other. We need to meet with each other. We need to meet each other where we are. We need to connect and build relationships. Where you see successes, you will see people talking to each other. Continuum of Care has a wonderful policy. They do not speak about parents and about families unless they are in the room. They don't speak about them outside of their presence. And the reason for that is because it becomes very easy to start having conversations about them and us. So part of this transformation has to be that when we hear the voices of lived experiences like we've heard today, we know those are people behind these policies and behind these case numbers and behind all of these different conversations, and that they are who live out whatever we decide. It's crucial that we listen and that we be willing to change. So thank you to the University of South Carolina School of Social Work and to DSS for hosting today's symposium. Thank you to the youth and the caregivers, the panels whose voices of lived experiences we heard today. Thank you to Children's Trust, DMH, DHHS, DSS. Thank you, all of you, for leaning in and being willing to change for good. I have enjoyed the opportunity to share and learn and improve with you this morning. University of South Carolina, back to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. All right, you guys, this is the time. I imagine we can extend a bit where we're going to be taking questions and answers. It's been great hearing all of this today. I'm going to turn it over to Emily Parks, who again is the Chief of Staff, our Chief of Staff for the South Carolina Department of Social Services. And I think that we're probably just going to go to panel view at this point as Emily takes questions and responds to those questions. Emily?
Great. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much. So as you all know, there was a wealth of great information shared today from all of our agency leaders, and now you have an opportunity to engage those agency leaders in a conversation. So if you have questions for them, please enter those into the question and answer box. We've had several that have come in already that we'll pose to our leaders. So at this point, I'm going to invite all of our agency leaders, Director Leach, Deputy Director Bryant, Sue Williams, Dr. Moss, Dr. Rogers, Director Baker, and Director Whittle to go ahead and come on camera and off mute for this section of our Q&A. So our first question for the panel this morning is, what do you see as your role as a leader and as an agency in transforming the larger child and family serving system? How do you plan to be actively involved?
Well, I mean, Emily, this is Mike. I can start. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done in South Carolina, and I think all the agency heads would agree with me, and the folks who presented. I think that we are looking at every single policy, right? That the ones that have been in place for many years or haven't been updated in 10 years. Looking at our practices, what's working, what isn't working, how do we have to sort of catch up to that, to what we know works in systems that are serving children. But transformation, what I was just talking about, isn't totally transformation, right? That's improving through a continuous quality improvement lens. All the things we know that need to be better for children and families. I think transformation is going to be something that we have to really work with our communities, listen to our communities, adapt and make the necessary changes and supports for the communities so that they can be healthier and feel supported, and not that, when we heard from our caregivers, right, that DSS rolls in and everybody scatters, right? Like they're afraid. We have to come in and make sure that we are, people are okay for asking for help, and that we are going to support and walk alongside them in that journey, and not be punitive or punish.
I think you're right, Mike. I think it is it's a strengths-based approach. Everyone has strengths, and I think Takoria touched on that, is that positive attitude that people are going to be okay. They just need a little help now and then. Some of us are fortunate to have extended family and friends that can help us when we have times of need, but there are many who don't. And so that's where DSS can come in, and the rest of the child serving system. But if we come at it with an idea of strength, that this is a child and family well-being system and not the punitive one that was from years ago. I think, as I like to say, when we were created in 1984, there weren't a lot of information about evidence-based programs. There weren't a lot of ideas of how to do prevention. We just knew we needed to do it. But fast forward, we now know about ACEs, we know about evidence-based programs, we know about brain science. So now that we know better, we have to do better.
Thank you, Sue. Other thoughts?
I think another opportunity, and this is something that I know that DSS is doing, and it's, I think, really important, and it falls in line with what Sue was talking about from Children's Trust and some of the other organizations that spoke today, and that is really looking at what's going on in the community arena. And again, there's some great models that I think are really fantastic. Communities that care, for instance, that's used for drug and violence prevention can be easily applied for child welfare. And what that does is it brings together community stakeholders on the local level, and it promotes evidence-based programming. So it kind of creates a structure so that people are focused around evidence-based programming rather than kind of willy-nilly stuff that might come out, and provides guidance, but then at the same time works with those communities to fit those type of models into a community-based approach to improve child welfare and ensure that not one organization like DSS is looked at as the protector of children, because we know that's not true. It's a community that takes care of children and improves their welfare, and that approach, I think, is an area that has a lot of potential.
And I think the other thing I would throw in is that this is going to sound really super basic, but I think here at DMH, we're really committed to working with the other child serving agencies to see if we can actually collaborate on doing things that are positive to help kids. That sounds very basic on one level, but if you look at states around the country, and if you look at what frequently happens when you're in difficult budget situations, is that kids services are often one of the things that gets chopped. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is make a conscious decision as an agency that we'll really focus on kids services, make sure that we're actually getting the biggest bang for the buck that we can. And oftentimes that's by collaborating and working with other agencies that have similar ideas, and not just other state agencies, but also the community. Because there are lots of folks that are doing things, whether it's through the faith-based community or other community organizations, that we could really partner with to see if we can really change the way that we approach children in general.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers.
And of course, I agree with everything that's been shared regarding this question so far. And part of that whole collaboration is just with each other in relationships of trust, where we can come together and talk about what families really need. Families can share with us what they need, and we can have relationships where folks can come to us and ask for help and know that there isn't going to be a terrible negative to asking for that help, whether that be another agency or a person on the phone. I saw something on Facebook that I thought was really silly, but so true. And just be teachable. You're not always right. So the way that we've always done things doesn't necessarily mean it was the right way to do things. So sometimes when we're asked to change the way that we do things, it's not an attack. It's just this idea that when we know better, we do better. And that there are certain things that are evidence-based, there are certain things that are outcome-based, and there are certain things that aren't. So if there are things that we're doing that don't work, that don't help people, that actually make people miserable, we have to trust each other and communicate and have the relationships that allow us to be able to do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Little. Thank you for all the responses. This next question is for Director Leach and Deputy Director Bryant. How can foster parents work to be another layer of support for birth families and for caregivers?
So I'll jump in, Karen, but you know, I'm going to start off by saying we believe in you and we care about you. How does that feel when I say those two things compared to somebody? It could be internally, it could be a case manager, it could be a foster parent, it could be somebody else saying, man, they're a terrible parent, but not thinking through all the things that they may be going through, all the stuff that we've been talking about, you know, this whole time, right? The addiction, stereotypes, poverty, mental health, societal oppression, all those kinds of things, right? Like, we believe in you. We know you can do this, and we're going to wrap around you and help you with that. You know, I think foster parents, one of the most challenging things for foster parents and for the system, even our frontline professionals and our just how we think of it is the interaction with biological families. How do we ask them to form a relationship with the person who you know, who is struggling with those things, right? The system is overwhelmed, as many of our systems are, right? And you know, we have to believe that people are in the system are trying to do their best and make it better. And parents care about their children and love their children, but are dealing with things that we have to figure out how to help. And let me tell you, you know, if we know that if foster parents are providing that support and wraparound, we see, you know, we see children learning how to model healthy, appropriate behavior. Parents model healthy, appropriate behavior that maybe foster parents are teaching them. Improved communication, positive support network a parent may have because of a foster parent doing that. Timely permanency increases with that. We see, oh man, positive connections. We see children have a better sense of self and self-worth when they see foster parents and biological parents working together. It's huge. I've heard things like it feels safe because they see their parents and their foster parents working together. It's natural, the same way your aunts and uncles and grandma, and it's authentic, and so they don't have to feel like they're living two lives, right? It's one community supporting a young person, and we can't be judgmental of folks based on the situations they have. I mean, we've heard the caregivers earlier, right? And so it's so good for them. And so we have to have our staff believe in that, and we also have to have foster parents believe in that.
So Emily, I will add something briefly to what our amazing state director just said, because I think he covered it all. The only thing that I would add is be willing and open to share the responsibility of parenting the child that's in your care. Be willing to see their humanness. Be willing to consider that life has happened to them just like life will probably happen to you tomorrow or the next day, or that it happened to you last year, and they need the support to really get back on track. So share the responsibility of parenting.
Thank you, Director Leach and Deputy Director Bryant. So this is our final question for today for all of our leaders. What is the biggest takeaway that you had as a leader hearing from the caregiver and youth panels? What will you do differently based on what you've heard today?
I'll jump in. It's something that we say when we learn in our ACE training, and we as a people tend to judge others. We think about how we might do it. If you exercise more, you could be like me, or, you know, we create these little biases. Mike talked about that, and it's not just racial biases. We have ideas about how other people should live their lives. And in the ACE training, you learn to say, what's happened to you, not what's wrong with you. There's something that's happened, and maybe I can help you fix that. Maybe I can't, but maybe I can share with you someone who can.
There's a lot of systems that are barriers to families healing and thriving, and they're not just from the child welfare system, but we got to look at all things: educational system, court system, juvenile justice, how we treat our families, the policies we have around our families, how we interact our families and our partners, right? All of that together, I think is going to make a huge difference. And we have to keep moving forward with, these ideals and thinking through how we can continue to do this better, like Director Whittle said.
I'd like to echo what Director Leach said. I think, in a particular area, for instance, the social determinant research on foster care is a step forward in a direction that I think will look at kind of the larger scope, macro level issues that affect how services are provided, how youth get into foster care, and importantly, how they get out. The other area that I think is really important is really taking an opportunity to look at what evidence supports anti-racist approaches towards policy and procedure, and how to incorporate that then through training and other modalities in order to improve practice over time.
I think my sense of urgency has been renewed about this idea of not making assumptions about what's best for people and trying to actually think about what the Adoption and Safe Families Act means to children and families. We heard today from some youth who were in foster care for a long time, and the state and federal law would require that their parents' rights be terminated and that they be legally free and placed for adoption. But I didn't hear them say that that was what they wanted today. So a renewed urgency about trying to make certain that our laws match with what's really best for children and families as we know now, and being willing to take on whatever we have to take on to be able to push against the way it's always been, and making certain that we can stay vigilant to run the course to get that done.
And I think for me, one of the things that jumped out that I had never thought about before today was how difficult it would be to get car insurance. That one thing just hit me in the face of, wow, never really comprehended the idea that a young person who's trying to do something really positive can run into a barrier. So one of the things I think that for me, we have to look at, especially in our agency, is how can we begin to advocate and figure out ways to help young people who are trying to move forward figure out how to get past some of those barriers that are really relatively basic, but they just need really a hand to figure out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to all of our leaders for engaging in that time of question and answer. Great responses, and I know that our audience appreciates it as well. So I'm going to take the liberty of wrapping us up today. As we wrap up our time together this morning, we want to say, we as in DSS, we as in UofSC, we as in all of the leaders on the call, want to say a collective thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today for our 2020 Winter Stakeholder event. We do not take for granted the sacrifice that each of you made to prioritize this event and to share your time, thoughts, and experiences with us. Thank you to our agency leaders who shared with us today the incredible work that they have done and plan to do, and who work every day to lead some of our state's largest child and family serving agencies to be more thoughtful, innovative, and collaborative in service to others. And thank you especially to our birth parents and our Youth with Lived Experience panel members who were vulnerable and shared their authentic experiences with us so that we might learn from them and their experiences and join alongside them to create a better child and family serving system moving forward. To close, I want to restate the call to action shared earlier by our Deputy Director of Child Welfare, Karen Bryant. DSS is not the system, and we cannot address child abuse and neglect alone. Caring for and strengthening families and responding to and addressing child abuse and neglect is everyone's responsibility and requires a strong public-private partnership. And now, more than ever, we remain committed to working alongside every one of you to develop a child and family well-being system and make South Carolina a model of transformation and a standard of excellence in the nation for how we work alongside children and families. If you have any questions following our time together today, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is displayed on the slide that you see, emily.parks@dss.sc.gov. Thank you again so much for joining us today and for partnering with us. We are so excited to see what the coming months bring. Have a wonderful afternoon.